Welcome to the Elite FTS Table Talk Podcast with your host, Dave Tate.
Okay, and here we go with Table Talk Podcast. What is that, number 5? This will be the Autism Awareness Edition. So today I have Sheena Leedham with me, who, man, we have a lot to talk about here. Let's start with your background, because I think people would recognize your name for being managing editor and for the articles and the content and so forth on the website that you do, but may not know the background with autism and the work that you're doing with OSU and so forth. So we'll kind of just breeze over the managing editor stuff real quick, because people can just look that up and find it, or just go to the articles. Every article that's published on the site has been published on the site because of her. So I will thank you for that. And actually, everybody should thank her for that. So there should be more than 3 little live comments. There should be like 1,000 right now posted up saying, thank you, Sheena. But let's get into the work that you're doing with autism. Let's go back further. Let's go to your background with autism.
Awesome. So just heading back to college, I have my undergrad in health and physical education, concentration in recreation administration. Then further, I got my master's in education K through 6. So at that point, I knew I wanted to educate and I wanted to be with kids. Then it was after graduating where all of my professional work just kind of circled around children and young adults with autism. So, working in nonprofit foundations, camps, in the public school, then going into a gym, and then having a special education director position, again, where we're just focusing on children and adults with autism. It wasn't as if this were my niche. It was just that's where I always ended up. I was always working with families and kids and adults, children with autism. So it was in Chicago really is where both my love for weight training and then children and education and then autism, it all kind of went together. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I was there for 2 years. And at that point in time, the background was I was writing for you guys. So I was a columnist for Elite FTS. And so things kind of transcended where I was coming here to train. I met you, heard your story. There was a job position that came available. And then I started to work here. And that's where, Blaine came into our life, or my life. But it was like hearing your story, it just naturally was a progression that I was going to go from, working here, new educational type of endeavor, but then I was still going to have that autism somehow. So, training Blaine now for 6 years, but in the meantime started to volunteer at OSU, and they have a social program, tailored for not only teens, but college students, young adults. And so just started volunteering there. And then, week after week after week, meeting the directors, meeting more parents, meeting professors and interns and graduate assistantships. And then it led to, hey, can you facilitate this program? And then that led to 2 other programs, working in the college arena. And I basically facilitate not only that social niche, but then also the, the fitness and the nutrition curriculum as well. So that's kind of, in a short, very brief way, how I've kind of, where I started and how that kind of brought me here to today.
The interesting part about this is there's actually a couple spin-off stories that go along with this that we were talking about the other day. Is when I trained at Westside, I used to train with, we called him Doc Dave. I don't even know if I knew what his last name was at the time that he trained there, but he was working at OSU developing the program that you're actually helping to work under now. I think it's Beversdorf. So, I mean, that's just kind of how Westside was. It was Doc Dave. So when I make the statements and make the jokes about the time that I trained at Westside, that we had everybody there from brain doctors. Well, that's kind of Doc Dave in a way, but not. I mean, as a brain doctor, but not like a brain surgeon, but still very relative in the field. And it's so interesting because, you know, many years later, after I think he was there for a few years, then he went on to, you would probably know better than I, Missouri.
Yeah. So right now, at University of Missouri.
Yeah. So he went on to Missouri to further his research that he was doing. And I do remember him kind of saying something and talking about autism, but you know, I didn't give a fuck. I was a meathead. I didn't give a shit at the time, so I had no whatever. That's what you do. You're up next. You know, we played her quarter and kind of go from there. Then several years transpired. I can't even tell you how many. And he reached out to me. It was actually Brian Mann, who's a friend of Doc Dave. Reached out because Doc Dave wanted to speak to me because his son was just recently diagnosed. Young son. I think son. I'm pretty sure son, but if not Dave, I'm sorry. It's his daughter, you know. And he wanted to talk because he knew that I had a child on the spectrum. And it was so interesting at the time because most of his work was done with adults with autism. And so Blaine might have been 5 or 6 or so at the time. So my questions were all about adults. Like, what the fuck, you know? I mean, you're trying to navigate this kind of blind territory that nobody really knows, but is he going to drive? You know, is he going to live at home the rest? You know, and so it was a really cool conversation because he was able to fill in a lot of gaps the best he could, you know, and I could the best I could, because as this conversation goes on, I think people are going to learn there's a vast, very vast I can't say it, but difference between ASD, you know, or whatever it's going to be defined as now, as far as how everybody is.
Yeah.
So that was the one thing that was kind of interesting, that in my life, it seems like everything always fucking falls back to Westside. In one way or another, it all falls back to Westside. And then I didn't know your background in autism. So it's like when we're looking at I don't believe I hired you. I think it was the senior editor at the time that did that. And it was kind of like a bonus, you know, that it's like, well, can't you do the job? Can you do this? Can you do yes. This is all positive. It's all positive. And then it was your handing Blaine a note, you know, which is in the article series that we'll link up, that kind of made my life easier because I had both the kids in the gym, you know, just to like any meathead does. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but I may, as we continue to go throughout this conversation, criticize myself and others for some of the things that I was doing and that I don't necessarily think was the most productive thing in the world. But it put him in an environment to where you were able to build a relationship to get some type of physical activity into his routine, where for him that was the problem. You know, kids are still kids, and I think that's going to be another underlying or overreaching theme that we're going to talk about is, you know, there's a lot of different definitions, a lot of different tags or whatever you want to say that are associated with ASD that still falls back to, oh, it's a kid.
It's a child, yes.
You know, it's still a kid.
It's a human being.
Yeah, so that's kind of the quick background of how Sheena became involved in Blaine's training, which is how most people who follow the site would know this. So we did put a link up on the front page of elitefts.com that I believe is titled Supplemental.
Yeah, supplemental material. So in there's like links of as far as different articles that you wrote, different articles that I wrote, just to give you some ideas of topics. And then also we gave an ebook, two free ebooks, one that you wrote on Angry Birds. It's the entire series. And then I have the 18 exercises your child wants to do, which again, kind of, it summarizes everything that we're going to talk about today. Everything that we believe in are in those 2 ebooks, you know, in some way or form, some way or fashion. So, yeah, that's on the front page.
Okay. And this is important for you guys to know, and we'll have Josh put a link to this in the video, and if you're listening to it on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else we're at, just go to elitefts.com and look for the link that will be on the homepage, and we'll keep it in a hero. We'll keep it somewhere prevalent for you to be able to find it for a week or two, because this is not, while it is Autism Awareness Month, this is not a new thing for us. I mean, it's an everyday thing for me. It's a kind of an everyday thing for you from a professional standpoint. And we've been putting out content related to autism for, since the Angry Birds thing. So, almost a decade, I bet. Even before that, as soon as I had to get to a point as a parent where I was frustrated enough to tap out a training log or a blog post and sit there and think to myself, do I really want to hit send or not? And then I did, and then I'm glad that I did, but then that, kind of created a section that developed on the article site, which is for special needs. So it's not just autism that we cover there. There's addiction, you probably can name it off better.
Yeah, different, like ADD, ADHD, we have depression, if that's not something that you already mentioned. A lot of it does fall under autism just because I've continued to develop that section. But that's something where special needs, like, hey, if you work with children with special needs, if you have special needs, we're always accepting articles and we're trying to develop that, so outside submissions, there's on the front page, if you scroll all the way down, it says outside submissions. You can click on there, and then just like minor specifications that we ask for, like reread your work, a light edit. We're going to edit it and format it and all that type of stuff. But if you have a story, if there's something that you can help. Clinton Darden, he also contributed to that. Amy Waddles.
Vince DeCenzio.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people associated with the site just from a professional standpoint that are related to, that work in this field. The thing is, there's a lot of crossover. So the questions that I get asked sometimes is, why do you have this if it's a strength and conditioning site? Well, you know what? If you own a private training center, you're going to end up having a child with ASD come in. And it may be a child that trains. It may not be a child that trains. It may be that trains. It may be a child that's with a mother or a father who's bringing in another child who trains. But you're going to be exposed to it. You're going to be associated with it. And training is growing immensely, and so is ASD. So we're not experts by any means. We're not going to say that we're on the number one site to go for your ASD education. It's just, I'm a father of a child that's on the spectrum. You work with a lot of children, kids, young adults who are on the spectrum, and you're around the research that's on the spectrum. So if we can offer the help, we're going to offer the help, because these are our customers, and we want to be able to provide the best service that we can to our customers, even if it is a step away from being strength and conditioning information that's going to help their total. And I could argue that essentially it still will help their total.
Yeah,
because they're going to be helping other people. So let's, what was the first question that we had that we wanted to tackle, Josh?
Yeah, the first question was from Powerlifter Strong 1585. It was, what exactly defines autism? Is it behavioral, learning abilities, social interactions? Sorry if I come off offensive. I don't know much about it at all.
Okay, just to kind of cut you off, and then this is my fault because I didn't let you know beforehand. When I put the question out on Instagram, I said that we weren't going to use any names. I really seriously doubt this guy's going to really care what you just said here.
Oh.
Yeah,
but moving forward, don't do that. Yeah, let's just omit the names, because I wanted to get people to ask real questions that we can try our best to give real answers to. So I'm going to step back from this one, and let you take it from here, because it's a fun one. So how do you define?
Yeah, sure. So, we're looking at something neurodevelopmental. It's considered a disorder, autism spectrum disorder. So when we think of neurological, then it's affecting everything, the composition of our brain. And so that's going to transcend into our cognitive abilities, our physical abilities, our emotional abilities, our behavioral abilities. It's going to affect everything. That in a nutshell is what it is. very briefly of what autism is. How would you define it in your role as a parent?
That's a tough one because I hate labels, and this is kind of one of the problems that I had when Blaine was first being diagnosed. And I may jump ahead here a little bit with this, but I grew up in a school environment to where I was learning disabled, just LD is what it was called, and had to have a tutor and all this other special stuff, and special time in class, had to sit in a special chair, pretty much everything away from not wearing a dunce cap. Then a few years later it was ADD, and then it was LD, ADD. I'm trying to think. Before the time I finished high school, there was like 5, and it's like it all just fell down to being learning disabled. And I'm like, what a shitty, and I'm not thinking this at the time because I'm a kid,
right.
And then a high school kid, and to me it's like, fuck you, okay, if I'm learning disabled, then I'm going to be strength enabled. I'm going to find some other way, to be able to kick everybody's ass. But what a terrible way, to label somebody would be learning disabled. And then when Blaine was younger, and we started to realize that there were delays, which I will get into with some of the other questions. My biggest fear was, oh, shit. Now, here, the last thing I want him to do is to share the same type of brain that I have. And I used to joke around and say, thank God he's adopted because he'll never have my brain. And he'll never have to live in that brain. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, fuck. Now he's going to have to deal with this labeling crap and all this stuff that took me decades to kind of get over and to deal with. And, having the right people at the right time makes a big difference as well. And, the tutors, the early intervention, all the things that they did when I was in school, I'm not going to say it didn't help, but because it did, otherwise I can't really spell now. Otherwise I would be far worse off than what I am now. It was probably became more of a driver for me out of, you're either going to do something because you're, it's either going to hold you down or it's going to push you forward. A lot of times that's your choice based upon whatever life situations is. You can take anybody that's had, the same situation, and one person that changed their life into a way that they just kick ass left and right. And you take another person that changed their life now they're chained to a ball in a hole that they can't get out of. So it either empowers you or disempowers you. And at some point in time, I think that's a conscious choice that we make. But I think I do believe that somebody somewhere along the line has to help enable that decision to actually come to life. And I was fortunate enough to have that. And with Blaine, I knew I could be that person, but it's just when to be able to be that person. So that's where, when it comes to how would you define it? I would say, well, when I first came into this whole thing with him, it was autism spectrum disorder, and then he was falling more on the spectrum towards Asperger's, which now they're starting to get away from using Asperger's. And my question was, well, if it's not Asperger's and it's on the other end of the scale, what is that? Autism. Well, what's the middle? Now it's ASD, so just in the period of 6 years, 7 years, that's longer than that. He's 16 years old. So in the period of 15 years, how many different labels have we had, or how many new ones have been thrown on top just for what? To create more confusion. Whereas a parent, I've always just kind of said, you know what, it's ASD, which is short for autism. Just go with that. Your kid's going to fall somewhere on the spectrum. I heard Dr. Hoagland, which is the school that Blaine goes to, say something that was perfectly stated. If it's his quote or not, I don't know. And it is, once you've met a child with autism, you met one child with autism. and that's it.
Exactly.
They're all different. But can't that same thing be said about any child? Once you've met a 6-year-old, you've met one 6-year-old. So
yeah, so I mean, you have this spectrum, and now, like you said, I mean, there are particular levels, and so I don't necessarily view it as a negative thing. It's just constantly we're redefining, we're getting smarter. We have neurologists that are coming up with ways to better state or to better describe this particular child, as far as what that condition is. Not, it's not the child's identity or anything, but mildly severe. At one point, mildly affected, we would say that would be low functioning autism. High functioning, then we would think of Blaine Asperger's, but now we have different levels, so it's going to help the professionals at this point better dictate, okay, well, the care that this child needs, this is the funnel that maybe we should start here. Okay, and then basically on the other spectrum or somewhere in between, okay, we just met Brad, for example, and based on the characteristics that we're seeing, his needs, we're thinking that he's going to be better, this fit is going to be better, and these are the professionals that are going, to be able to work for him. So, yeah, when I think of it, it's neuro, so it's going to affect the whole body. But again, once you meet a child with autism, like you were saying, you're going to meet one child with autism. Last night, just kind of looking over the questions and whatnot, my brain's just flooded with all of the kids that I've met, 9 years ago. And, I was telling JP, like, I'd have one child come in, just burning of energy, running the walls. He needed heavy impact, and he needed to spin, and then we needed to put, like sandbags over him. He needed that compression. He's yelling, he's crying, he's smiling. He's not really formulating sentences. A ball of fire was the best way I could describe it, So what he needed, was going to be totally different than, say, another child that walked in the door that, maybe he was getting ready for soccer tryouts. And he could speak, he was studious, he knew exactly what he wanted, he wasn't there to play, And so what he would need, even though he was under that umbrella, it was going to be a totally different script and, route that we would take with him. So it's like when you're defining it, there's obviously a definition, and there's people that are, we're professionals, and this is who we work with, but it's a very abstract type of thing.
Yeah, and I will agree that the more it can be defined, the better it will be, because fortunately for Blaine, he is in a school that's 100% for autism, but they are, full spectrum autism. So he may be in a class with 5 children that are high functioning, and some may be high functioning, low behavior, and somewhere in the middle, where they'll have another class which will be low functioning, maybe better behavior. It's all along the board. Where if he was in the public school system, and some public school systems are far better than others. So, I'm in a small town, so it's hard, and I won't make judgment across the board because you just can't do that. But he's able to do schoolwork 2 grades ahead of what he is and never have homework, never have to worry about that. Now you get him upset, then he starts to have a meltdown. Well, then, there's going to be an issue with that. Where if it was all, here's, like when I grew up, here's the learning disabled class, here you go. Everybody's going to kind of fall to whatever the common denominator is. All right, okay, I'm smarter than this, but fuck it, I don't have to do shit. I'm going to sit here and not do anything, because it's being all based upon whatever the lowest denominator is in the course to be able to make it easiest for, the teacher or whoever at that given time. So in one way, a child's education is severely being impacted, where in another way, it could actually be really pushing and hard for them. And that's where I would say there is a difference, because you can take, a regular child, and you got honors classes, then you got the regular classes, and most children can handle the regular classes. Some definitely need to work way harder. I got another son that's that one that has to work way harder than the others, but can do it, forces himself and be able to get it done. If I was to take Blaine and put him back into the public school system, he could just kill the schoolwork, but he's not going to be able to handle the pencil tapping. He's not going to be able to handle, just the chair sliding around, the noises, the ticks, all the little kind of stuff like that. He's going to lose his shit, and he's going to be in school suspension or out of school suspension most of the time, which is where one of the questions later is going to fall around an IEP, and that really needs to be discussed because a lot of people are fearsome of that. So
it's something that you just said too, where you have Blaine, his intelligence, his cognitive ability, but once he gets into a certain environment, it's such disorder, and it goes back to that neurological, developmental thing there that's he can't organize that. So that's going to totally shut him down, So then if he's not in the right environment, then his cognitive ability is not going to be displayed,
Yes.
and then he's going to appear to be someone that he's not. So it's so that's why those experts at his school are going to be able to say, okay, here are his abilities. This is the environment that he needs, and then it transcends to what he needs at home. It transcends to if that's working at school, if that's working at home, then that's something I use in the gym for him. And then you see how he's going to now get a job, and he's going, he's set up for success. It's just it's based off of being able to diagnose it, define it, and give him the help that he needs to. He has you as his advocate, and then he's in an environment that's enriching exactly what he needs. So just whatever you said, it just that disorder or not being able to organize those things in the mind,
Yes.
that comes down to that, the very basics of our process, of our system.
The one thing that I've learned with him, and that I try to express to parents who will ask me, is, you're dealing with kids that will say things that we cognitively can't understand, such as, he may tell me that he hears colors, or he sees sounds. Now, this could very well be true, but it's so alien to me. It's like, what the fuck? So I learned a long time ago I'm not going to fight this. I'm not going to resist this. I'm going to use it to kind of help to redefine things, because it's been a weird time and a great time, because we are learning more. I just happen to be having a child during one of the probably biggest booms of, autism diagnosis of all time. Now, is there more autism than before? That's debatable. We're not here to debate, so I should make that clear to anybody that's putting through live feeds. We're not here to debate that. We're not here to debate vaccines. We're not going to go down any of those routes. We're here to talk about the children and the parents and what we can do in real world
causes and all of that. Yeah.
Today. And, when he was younger, I remember a reading that, a lot of autistic children lack empathy. And I'm like, well, how do they know? I mean, you're talking about some kids who see sounds, but they lack empathy. And then I start asking myself different questions, like, maybe what you see as this lack of empathy is over empathy that they don't know how to process. So, well, yes, an onlooker, I can sit there and say, yeah, he really doesn't give a shit. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's so much that it overwhelms him that he just says, nope, shutting down. This is where, the research and the answers. But as a parent, these are the questions I think you have to ask, are more out-of-the-box questions to try to understand your child, because there's and I'll wait to some of the specific questions to get into that, because there are some commonalities I think that parents run into, especially when and there's commonalities with friends, relatives, and families that run into with that as well. One of the things that I think we should jump into real quick so we don't forget is your groups are between, 10 and 15?
At OSU?
Kids at a time?
Oh, the amount of children that would be within a group?
That go out with.
Yeah, it ranges, but sometimes we'll have anything from like 5 kids to maybe 25 kids.
Okay.
Guys.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
guys. And Blaine's been a part of many of those. And what I want to throw out and let's discuss a little bit is a lot of parents, I was scared to death, because he doesn't do well, with other kids. But you got 25 kids, and they all are on the spectrum. And from what I know, there's very few major, I'm sure there's issues here and there, but there's very few major meltdowns, issues, incidents. Talk to me about that. Like,
Sure.
Is there a structure for that? Is it, if parents want to try to find a way to get their kids involved? Because I think as a parent of someone, as any parent, you want your kid to have socialization skills. And I can bring him in the gym, and I'll talk about the gym, and Blaine, there's questions on that. I'll talk about that, but not everybody has that opportunity that I do, but they want to socialize their kids. So what should they look for from that regard, and what should they look for from whoever is administrating, hosting, or whatnot?
Sure. And so I'm going to back up. You mentioned Dr. Beversdorf a while ago. So his work at OSU was to create a program called Aspirations, and that would be something that would focus on those social skills, because the research at the time was showing that social skills has a direct correlation to what they're going to be able to contribute to once they're in the world, how they're going to be able to prosper at a job, if they're even going to get hired. So that was the cornerstone of Aspirations at OSU at the Neisinger Center. So it's kind of just like the spectrum. There is this big umbrella, and it's called Aspirations. So back to Beversdorf, though, he created, it was, a couple-week pilot study of if we have something, in a classroom where we're, pinpointing these social skills with professionals week by week, what is going to be the end result? Are these guys going to be able to have the skills that they need in order? So they're talking about resumes and just all of those things, all those life skills that surely they got in high school, but now it had more of a could hit home, because now they're the age where they have to do that. Like in high school, it's kind of like, oh, that's something that I'll have to do in the future, but doesn't hit home until you're actually in that stage, So he had great success with that. And so that is a program where, say you just went through, you're in high school, or you're in college, or you're out of school and you're not sure if you're going to go the college route, just get a vocation. The Aspirations program is to have that type of that social training, it's formal. It's how do you approach somebody, and how do you look them in the eye? How do you shake their hands? What does it mean to respect? If you are looking to have friends, how are you going to go do that? So that's like that formal type of training. Then, so if you go through those 8 weeks, then you have other opportunities under this aspiration. So that's where I come into play, would be men's aspirations. And then there's women of aspirations, and there's a slew of other different programs, but they start you at that base that you're going to learn those social skills, and you're basically going to graduate so that you now have multiple opportunities because you already went through that. Does that make sense?
Yes. So they're kind of training them to be a little bit like Dexter.
They're assuming that there are some holes from what, and yeah.
So you know who Dexter is?
I mean, I've heard of it, but
it's a joke.
Dexter's Laboratory.
He's a sociopath serial killer that really.
I thought you were talking about Dexter's Lab, different generations.
So that he has to fake all of his emotions to kind of get through life. But anyhow, it was a joke. So it was a crude joke, but it was a funny joke. All right, go ahead.
But so yeah, it's like filling in those gaps and assuming that, you know, this is a skill that wasn't transcended from school or from the family, and we're going to work on this and until we show, you know, some skills were derived, and that now we can go into the community, and now we can be with 15 or 25 guys, and, you know, things are going to go smoothly. If I'm you know, not too excited about doing this particular activity, I'm going to have basically those coping skills to be able to be like, you know what, okay, I'm going to go through this, but then I'm going to be able to do this or whatnot. So a bunch of different programs that are below or above aspirations. And so now you have some different opportunities. So men's aspirations, it actually started, you know, men of aspirations. And when I was asked to facilitate it, you know, that was the first thing where I was like, men of aspirations, like I want the guys to have this ownership of aspirations, like it's theirs, you know? So that was like the first thing we're starting to change what this program, what's the point of it. So when, just a little bit of background, when I first started, you know, and just sitting there and observing, okay, this is a program. I'm not going to come in and change it drastically, but what are they trying to accomplish? And here, now they're in public. We have, say they had like 10 to 15 or 20 guys. They're in a restaurant. You know, now they're getting skills of working with a waitress. And, you know, now I have a menu and I have to choose something of what I want to eat. I have to be able to articulate that. Now I have to have patience. I'm getting my food. All those like processes, which are absolutely crucial. Again, that's that social, if I can't conduct myself in the restaurant, how am I going to be able to conduct myself at the job place or anywhere else? So I saw definitely some validity of what they were doing. And then it was the next month, we're going to another restaurant. And then the next month, we're going to go watch a movie, and then we're going to go get a snack. And I was just like, based on my background, you know, that was just blah. And okay, I got it. Like I got the whole how I'm supposed to behave in the restaurant, but what else? You know, social ability is so more than that. So that's where I was like, I want these kids to be able to move and to have, you know, some type of recreational aspect, and we're doing things, and yeah, maybe we're going to get a snack, but that's just like a small portion of what we're going to accomplish. So it was redefining what this program was intended to do. So it was mixing activity, recreational, sport, in a sense, exploring Greater Columbus area, dining, music, all into one. And so how this works is rather than me saying, okay, well, I'm interested in going to jump parks, and I love hiking, but it's not a program for me, it's for them. So when we were at that restaurant, one of the first few months, it was, hey guys, I'm Sheena, you know, I want to know more about you. What do you guys like to do? And so I wrote down some things that I like to do just to kind of change their processes, because already they were like, one of the guys was thinking, well, I like pancakes, you know, like I like just other food, because that's what they were used to doing. And so when I put down like, well, man, I like to jump, and then somebody was like, I like bowling. And so then we created like a table full of things that they were interested in. And so then as I'm planning this schedule monthly that we're going to meet, I'm choosing Michael's choice. He wanted to go ice skating. And so now I'm building a story, you know, of when we sat down and we were thinking of our choices, Michael wants to go ice skating. So for this month, we're going to go ice skating. And here are all the things that we're going to look forward to. And then, so a program that was built on their interests. Each month, we're doing something else. So maybe January, we'll go ice skating. And then the next month, based off of like the environment and how the weather and where we're at and whatnot, we've already gone to festivals, hiking. We're going into caverns. The next month we're going, maybe we're going fishing. Then we're going into the city, short north here in Columbus, and we're going to make candles. And then we're going to go to this, you know, big toy store. And then the next month, maybe we will go to a movie. We're just going to chill out. So we're doing a bunch of things. So how does this work, right? So we can think of like if you think of your child, like Bryce, for example, you know, they get all the parents together, they're going to go rollerblading, and then all the parents are kind of chilling at the snack shop, and then you're just like, well, this place is going to take care of itself, right? We're just going to go rollerblading. Well, that might be like the misconception of what we're doing here. So, you know, so bringing these kids, they chose to be here, and now based off of that interest, naturally now the social function, the abilities, the skills, it happens naturally, but everything had to be organized. Everything had to be RSVP'd. You know, all the background information has to be set. But now they're in an environment where, say for example, we're going to go like laser craze or something like that with guns and whatnot. So now they're immediately engaged because they chose to be there. So, and this is going to debunk everything that we know about autism, right? So we have kids that so we think are not social. They don't care. They'd rather be on video games. They are not going to be engaging. They're not going to be helpful. There's going to be no empathy. So that's what we already kind of talked about. But based on their interests, based on what I have set up, they come there, they're engaged. Now they're going to listen to, you know, the guy that runs the place because they need the rules before we get into our first mission of the day. And now you're going to see a group of, 20 guys. They're silent, they're engaged, they're listening, they're asking questions, they're raising their hand. And so now we need to gear up. Now we need guns, we need our artillery. And so now, we'll have Evan, and he'll be like, hey, he's asking now another guy, why'd you choose that gun? And the kid's like, well, I chose this gun because it can do this, this, and this. And, we're going into the kitchen for our first mission. So this is why I'm choosing this gun. So now I never had to say, okay, guys, let's be polite. If you have a question, or I don't have to be like that. It's just raw, and it's natural. So now the guys are going to each other to learn more, and now they're naturally becoming friends. So now we have the skills that we needed. We're engaged. We listen to the rules. We have our tools that we need, and now we're going to go have fun. Now we're creating an experience. It's raw. It's real. We're forming out. I'm trying to think of the word, but, we have to work together. With this particular event, we have teams, and we have to come up with strategy and whatnot. So all that higher level type of thinking. And then at the end, now we're resting, we're sweaty, we're hot, we're getting drinks and whatnot. And now the guys naturally come up to each other. Man, that was awesome. Good job on that. What are you doing next week? Did you ever watch that movie? So that's the premise of everything that we're trying to accomplish through Men's Aspirations is putting them in a situation that they want to be a part of. And then based on that, because it's active and it's fun and it has us moving and it's something brand new, or maybe it's familiar to some guys and not others, it naturally works. And then we're hitting everything. Now we're being active, we're being healthy, we're drinking, we're eating, we're socially building these skills. Now we're having experiences. Now we're having memories. And, one of the parents was saying too, my child went to this event. They never had been there. They had this fantastic experience. And now, say, weeks later, they're asking, hey, can we go back there? Whereas before, that wouldn't have ever hit their radar, because that would have been, an experience that there was no memory to, or, maybe it was fearful, or there was just nothing there. They didn't even know maybe they were interested in that. So then it transcends then to now the family has more options, and they're doing something more. So that's the premise of Men's Aspirations. And so I can remember, training with Blaine for multiple years, and then Men's Aspirations getting more and more sophisticated. And then it was just the next logical step for Blaine. And I remember asking you, hey, is this something that you'd like, for Blaine to tag along? And I could just, I can still see your face where you're there was that fear of, holy crap, now he's going to be with a bunch of kids, somewhere far away from home. How's this gonna pan out? And it was, thankfully, you trusted me at that point in time, but now he had a voice, he had choice. Blaine, what are you interested in? Well, I'm trying to think of what one of his choices were not too long ago, but it was, hey, Blaine chose this, so already he has that competence, he's excited, and then he goes there and he's fine. He wants to be there. And now, just like with the prior example that I gave you, he's all into the guns and the mission and strategy. And so then he's an expert in that. And now he's helping other guys. So it just naturally now, guys are asking for his phone number, and Blaine's just reserved, and he'll say, I'm good, and that's not what he needs at this point in time. But that has already started where, guys are wanting to hang out with him. So that, and there's activities that we do that he's not interested. Yeah. So he's not gonna go that time, and that's fine. And then he'll pick up the next month.
That's one of the cool things about children or teens, that are ASD, however we want to define them, is their brutal honesty. Sometimes it may not be the best thing in the whole world, but they're not really good at lying because they don't see the point, which is that sometimes it's funny, at other times it's like, oh man, maybe you want to be a little more reserved. But to digress and kind of dive back into the aspirations program is one of the most frequently asked questions that I saw going through the list was from outside family members, cousins, friends of families, or, people that, they had a lot of questions in general, but one of the more popular questions were, how can we help, and I think understanding is probably the best way you can actually help is, just that, and actually wanting to help. Like if that's, I don't want to segue too far off where I want to go with this question, but a lot of times people will, they're going to say, yeah, I want to help. Until you say, well, I need a sitter on Friday night. But they don't want to help anymore, so they want to help on their own convenience. But when I think what they're really speaking and what they're really wanting to try to do is kind of what you're talking about doing. Like, hey, can I take them bowling? Can I do this? Can I do that? And there's a process behind what you're doing. And I'm sure, because not everybody is going to have access to the programs that you're talking about. I'm sure they're not in every city. I guarantee they're probably not even in every state. And most the people that would want to do this aren't going to be talking about groups of 3, 4, 5. It's just going to be, their children and maybe one of their friends' kids that has ASD that they just kind of want to bring along, from that standpoint. And to digress back into the story that you just told, I think the first thing that has to be established is the trust, especially if the parent isn't going to be there. And I would say as a parent, it's huge. The trust is huge, but I do think that it's important for you to be able to let go and have somebody that you trust be able to take your child, as long as the child's of old enough age, somewhere to bowling, with other kids. And a lot of that trust really boils down to, can this person handle a meltdown? That's really what it is. For me, it was. It's not, oh, my kid's going to get stolen. It's like, I seriously doubt somebody's going to steal my kid, because as soon as they put him in the car, they start throwing a meltdown, they're going to drive around, drop the kid off at the fire department real quick. This isn't going to last very long. But it's the meltdown. That's what we worry about is, oh shit, my kid's going to be in a bowling alley somewhere. He's going to be having a 3-hour meltdown. The person who took him is going to have no idea what to do. They're not going to want to call because they're not going to look like they, it's just, that's the fear. And a lot of that falls on the parent to be able to understand that the person knows how to handle this. They got it under control. They know. Or teaching the person. here are the things sensory wise, which we should talk about sensory processing as well, that are going to be able to help. So once that trust is established, then it's what processes should they look at if it is a friend's child. Let's just say the average age that I was being asked about was like 6 to 10. 6 to 10 years old, going to laser tag, a jump house. I mean, something that is going to be overly stimulating, but not, guys, it's not always as overly stimulating as you think it is if you go at the right time, at the right place. There's always dead times where it can happen. What things should they be looking for to make them comfortable to say, yeah, go ahead, take them, and how long, should, because the person who's going to be asking is going to be the person that wants to take them.
Right.
So my advice to them is, first off, know what you're getting into at the worst case scenario.
Yes.
Just ask. They will tell you. Just ask. And then from there, what advice would you give? Like, what's a good time frame? What processes should be set up? What should be known beforehand? And kind of go from there. That way we can give something that they can actually use and try. And if they fail, did they really fail, or what do they need to go back to reassess to be able to fine tune it? Because failure is just one step into getting it right the next time.
Yeah, so this is a heavy question, believe it or not. But so I'm going to use Blaine as an example, just because you're going to be able to relate pretty well. But, we started at the gym, and surely, like, I wanted to go to the park and I wanted to go to all these places. But it literally took us, I think, maybe around 2 years before that became a natural progression. So how that happened was, we're at the gym, we're training, day one, we already made a connection. We were ready to go. But then we started to bike ride outside. And then naturally it was urged by Blaine, well, I want to go a mile, and we're in a parking lot. So it was, at that point, it was like, well, there's a trail. We have to, ride our bike to the trail, and then we're going to be able to go a mile. So a lot of times, as much as it is great, it's a normal thing that we go to the mall or we go to the jump park, and the child's going to have all these great experiences. You have to really take a look at the child. What does he want? Has he asked about this? Is there any type of interest? What are you trying to accomplish with this? So it's going back to the trust, but then it's going back to the child. Is there any type of foundation up to that point? If it's a cousin or an aunt or an uncle that wants to contribute, one thing back to men's aspirations a quick pivot would be, I say, know your rules. So for example, myself would be the person that's I'm the educator. I'm going to organize it. I'm going to be able to talk to the parents. I'm going to actually do everything. So I have multiple roles. The parents, well, they're not going to organize. They're not going to, be checking on their son every couple seconds. They're there as like backup in case something bad were to go, and that their child knows, if I want to leave, my mom's here. But they're not going to take my role. JP, for example, I just put it as bro. He's not going to organize the event. He's not going to be thinking of the educational processes we're going to go through. He's not there to take kids home. He's there to be there in the moment and talk about beards and, what movie did you watch last night? Actually engage and be present with the guys. We had a director that had the religious background and the social worker, license. That was his role. So if somebody needed to talk about, take them aside and talk about somebody just passed away in their life, he was going to take that role. So for those individuals that you're talking about that want to be a part of this child's life, and they really are seeking to have it that they experience, different life skills and good memories, and they're going away from home, that's great, but they have to know where is their role, because it is a very wide thing that we're trying to accomplish. So again, with Blaine, that took us 2 years to get off home base, you know. And it wasn't that I chose, he chose it. It was just a natural progression. So, for example, if I'm an uncle and every single weekend I'm going to, you know, my sister's house to play with their kids, for example, and they're in the backyard and there's a trampoline, right? And for weeks upon weeks, you know, there's just that connection, that trust. They knew who he is. They're familiar with what actually they're engaging in. There's other kids that are a part of it, you know. Then you're starting with a base, and then naturally maybe the next progression is to go to a jump house or something like that. But, you know, they started somewhere, and there's a skill that's developing, and there's interest and whatnot. So I like, that's where I kind of want to start. If somebody's interested in trying to be a part of their life, have a starting base, and then allow the child to kind of negate where that goes. So
the role's important. It's something I didn't put thought into, but not only know the role, but know the limitations of the role, you know, because I do think that will make the parent more comfortable as well.
Yes.
You know, from that standpoint, because the reason why we're having so much dialogue about this is with children on the spectrum, and I hear it all, I hate to keep saying I hear it all the time, but I do. You know, I hear it all the time. You know, all my kid does is play video games. Well, first off, that's every kid. All right, so this is not like an autistic thing that the kids just play video games. It's every fucking kid that I know just plays video games. So it's the same thing. So it's you know, as parents and as a community, we need to get our kids, you know, away from the games, you know, a little bit more often, or maybe stay at the computer but read. You know, find a book or something to be able to read and engage, you know, and train their mind and so forth. But with that, I kind of lost my thought with the video game thing, because I hear it so frequently. It's like, you know,
a big topic.
It's not an autistic thing, guys. It's, you know, it's all kids, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, you know, because for a lot of the kids who are on the spectrum, that's how they're going to chill. It's how they're going to relax. It's their, you know, getaway, or watching videos, or whatever it's going to be. And it's the same with any kid. I guess I was speaking about the roles. When the parent knows the limits of the roles, they don't want to send their kid off and say, you're going to go over to Johnny's house to play. Then all he's going to do is sit there and play video games the whole time. You know, there needs to be socialization, and not just, and I don't want to make this, I'm trying so damn hard to try to not make this so ASD related, but it is Autism Awareness Month, so I guess I probably should keep it ASD related. You know, all of our kids are missing socialization, and I don't want to go into a social media rant, but, you know, that's partially involved, but kids aren't on social media. Most of the kids I know, that's video games, you know, so it is what it is. And when they do have ASD, they fall into their comfort zones more readily, maybe would be a good way to explain it, or more easily than what typical, you know, and I hate to say that, because I think all kids are typical, all kids are different, you know, than what your neurotypical child, you know, would be. And to get them out, you know, it's kind of a little bit harder to be able to do. But if there is, you know, a cousin or, you know, family member, a friend of a family member who's committed, and it's like you said, it takes time, and I don't think they really get this part, and it's a big part. You know, it's a big time, and not like once a month type of thing. I mean, we're not talking like every day or every week or whatever it is. It's a developing a relationship the same way you'd have to develop a relationship and trust with anybody else. You know, you can develop fake trust within a quick week, you know, with anybody, but real trust is going to have to take time, you know, to be developed. But then once you get that and they can break away from that, you know, from Blaine's perspective, you know, we went from a kid that lived on an iPad. I mean, pretty much 24/7 lived on an iPad. And he still, you know, got his iPad and computer both going at the same time, and, you know, whatever else going. But when he comes in the gym, even on the days he's not working with you, he's in here joking around with everybody. He's having a good time. I mean, he's a jokester. You know, it's like, oh my God, my kid's cracking jokes. You know, and he's social. You know, he's social when he goes out with his cousins, and he's telling stories, and he's doing things that it could be maturity, it could be age, but I think it's more than that. You know, I think it's the process of being exposed to other kids that he could relate to. You know, where it's hard to relate to kids that you really don't have anything in common with, and that would be the same again with any child. You know, it's just it's kind of funny to me. I don't want to go on to a rant that, you know, everybody says every child is different. Every child should be different. And, you know, that's the great thing about diversity. And that's the great thing about, you know, being American or being a human and so forth. Unless you have autism, then I guess you all got to be all the fucking same. You see what I'm saying? It's like, where did this disconnect happen? Because now they're different in a way that you don't define as being acceptably different. Isn't that called prejudice? You know, so, you know, it's, and that's kind of the framework that you get as a parent going through all this and from that spectrum. So my advice to the parents is, or to those people that want to try to help, sometimes it's a coach, you know, then it's like, hey, I got a kid on my team, you know, that's got ASD. What do I do? Ooh, man, tough question there, because they're all different. You know, does he get along with the other team? I mean, if he gets along with the other team members, they all get along, they're all having a good time, and he just sucks because he doesn't have the, you know, coordinational skills, let him have fun. You think he doesn't know that he sucks? You know, it's, you're, some of them you can definitely, everybody can become better, but some of them will have certain coordinational delays. I think more so due to lack of development when they were younger, not so much due to their cognitive or neural. I could be completely 100% wrong on this. I don't read the research. I just raise the kids. But I'll let you jump in on that one, because you were working with Blaine when he was younger, and a lot of that was, you know, visual acuity and coordinational skills and balance and so forth. Where one thing I do think where parents that have kids that are strength training screw up regardless of it is they take them in the gym and they just want to teach them how to squat, bench, deadlift, or, hey, you know, look, my daughter just deadlifted a dime per side. It's like, who gives a fuck? Right. You know, can she move her body weight? Can she do a push-up? Can she lunge? Can she do basic stuff? Does she have visual acuity? Does she have coordination? So I'll let you go from there on childhood development.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, again, once you are doing this for so long, we each have our own, like, this is my program. This is what I do. And I do have, like, the processy that I go about when, you know, creating a program for a child. So, and so starting off with observation. So, and I can kind of relate this to powerlifting, really. So observation, go back to Blaine, you know, I'm observing day one when I didn't even know who he was and I knew you. I'm going to sit in the corner and I was just watching you guys. I'm taking notes, or I'm just kind of thinking, you know, in my head. So now I have a child who really doesn't want to be here. I have a father who is like the bar whisperer, and he knows everything about strength and conditioning known to man. But there's a disconnect, so I'm trying to figure this out. How does Blaine perceive his father? You know, how is Dave treating his son? What works? What doesn't? What is Blaine motivated by? Well, he keeps on going to his DS in the corner, and he's sitting down, he's crouched over, he's playing. Okay, so then play was a great motivator. So then I see that too with how you're training with him. At one point you're working, you have like a dowel rod, and you're you know, maybe you're nudging him, and that's getting his attention, and you know, messing with his hair. He's feeling that love and all of that. So that's me. Is how is he walking? How's his gait? Is he able to pay attention? all of those things come into play during that observation, just like you would have if you're watching somebody in the squat. You know, where are their knees? Is their chest up? Are they squeezing the bar? Are they getting their breath? Or they're keeping their feet on the ground? So it's all the same thing. It transcends to everything. So based on that observation, now I'm going into communication. So how can I best communicate with this child based on my observation? And so the route that I chose with Blaine was play. That's where I needed to start. So, and I knew that I wasn't going to say, "Hi, Blaine, I'm Sheena. I want to work with you," because Blaine, without even knowing him, based on how he was treating you, the way that he was, you know, comfortable, he would have literally, I think, just ignored me, maybe turned around and dismissed me. So I just wrote, hey, Blaine, do you want to play a game? And I tossed it over his way, and he literally had the DS in his hand. He dropped the DS, then looked at me, so immediate eye contact.
What did it say on the paper?
It
on the
said, hey, do you want to play a game?
Okay.
And then so he looks at me, he looks down, he says, "In a minute." And then immediately I was like, well, that just worked. You know what I mean? So, but again, that was based on communication or the observation. If I didn't have that keen sense of what's happening, what he needs, what we're doing, then that I would have gone up to him and tried to shake his hand and make it very awkward, you know. So from there, observe, communicate. Now I'm able to create a schedule. So now what are the things that we're going to accomplish with this training schedule? In this particular time, or this particular session, I'm just trying to get to know him, see what works, what doesn't work, and we're going to play because that's what he wants right now. He doesn't care about his posture. He doesn't care if his hamstrings are weak or if if his resting heart rate is too high. Like, we don't care about that. So the schedule takes time to create, but like with this first session, we're just looking to have fun. Moving forward, though, like now I'm the coach and I have a child with autism, and I have to create a program. It's like everything you do in the gym with your power lifters. What are we trying to accomplish? So we're going to get that from the child. What does the child want to accomplish? Play, okay. The father wants this to be accomplished. Developmentally, as the expert, I know we need to work on X, Y, and Z. The school system, they want this to be brought up. So now you have all these pieces that you're going to try to formulate into this schedule. And we're going to, a schedule is a schedule. Anyone can come up with a schedule. Now we have to execute it. But within that schedule, I kind of break it down into structures and inserts. So our structures might be, in this case, it doesn't have any hold, but our 1 rep max in the squat. That might be that's our goal. And so from there, we're going to work on all of these different things to reach that goal. So my structures might be, yes, I want that strength component. I want that coordination component because, based on Blaine, coordination is where we need to start. Balance. He's walking, he's running into things. Maybe his idea of the space that he's in, he doesn't know how that correlates. Like, he doesn't know how to manipulate the space that he's in. And so that would be something that may be part of it. Fine motor skills. Maybe we don't know how to tie our shoes, or we can't pick up things that are small, or we can't pick up a pen. So that might be another structure within that schedule. And then based on that child, how are we going to get from point A to point B? So if we're starting, say, fine motor skills is like the main thing that we need to work on, well, we're going to put that in our programming first. That's where we need to put all of our energy. That's where we need to have that effort, that patience. It's going to be very hard for that child, so we're going to start there. Then the inserts are maybe after that we need to rest. Then we need a snack. And then we're going to go back to whatever we're going to use for that strength training day, those compound movements, or maybe that's just practicing getting up and off the floor, or hip lifts or whatnot. And then from that moment, now we're going to do something that's conditioning based. Well, I want to give the child some choice because he just went through some high stress with that fine motor skill. we had a break. Now we went off to, something that was strength training. We needed another break. Now the child's going to feel like, man, I can be creative too, and I can have choice, and maybe I'm the expert, and maybe I can teach that person, can teach me how to do something. That's important. And then we're going to get into whatever all those pieces showed that we need to work on with that schedule. So there's a starting point. We have 30 minutes, and this is what we're going to do in 30 minutes, and that's maybe something that the child will see. He's a part of it. He or she's crossing off as we go. And so all of those components are in that schedule. And then just based off of that, then we need progress, So like I said, anyone can create a schedule. Here you go, do this today. But how are we progressing? So we're thinking of our social progression, our physical progression, our behavioral progression. These are all things that I consider in the gym, so we're pinpointing that. And then another aspect to that is the motivation aspect, so intrinsically, is it when you give the child choice that's fulfilling that need of I'm creative, I'm competent, I have great ideas, I can be a teacher? Is that, I'm curious, I want to be challenged? And then extrinsically, in Blaine's case, we used tally marks for a long time. So that was something that was used in the school system. That's probably the main thing that I was able to take from that school, that school piece and put it in my schedule was, what he perceives that if he has high effort and he's doing something really well and he earns that tally, that after, 12 tallies, now he's going to earn McDonald's. So that, and now it's not even, that doesn't even do anything for him. We don't even talk about McDonald's. Now it's that we're going to have enough time so that we can work on robots at the end of our session, or we're going to be able to build a Lego game or work with Legos. So what extrinsically is going to motivate that child to get through that schedule that, may be difficult and sometimes, but we're going to put play and fun and accomplish that. So those are the building blocks of creating a schedule that I've found works, and I think in your perspective, you're yeah, I'm creating programs for 6 people here that are professional powerlifters, and it's the same type of, similar type of, processy. So that's basically how I set that up.
It's all the same processy, but it's your level of competence or your level of, unconscious competence, not knowing what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And for, to step back, both of my kids grew up in the gym. I mean, so a stroller or baby carrier or whatever it is. And a lot of the reason for that is not because, I wanted them to be in a hardcore gym environment. It was, my oldest had autism. Mm-hmm. You don't find babysitters. I mean, that's just a fact of reality. Mm-hmm. You can try to find one, you might get one once, and then after a while you're like, fuck it, it's better if I just take them. Mm-hmm. And then you take them and you can keep an eye on them from a distance. But with neither, however it's said, of my kids have I ever put them on a quote training program. Mm-hmm. And to this day I still have not, because they've not expressed the interest, and they're both teenagers now. So in one regard, it's frustrating, being a parent that comes from this, and it's completely transcended and changed my entire life, to both of them not really having, or sharing, I should say, the same degree of interest, which is probably a good thing, because I probably have an unhealthy degree of interest, or I did. But with Blaine, it was a little bit different because I knew there were delays. You can just tell from things that you were talking about that I've known, just in gait, and strong as hell though. I mean, even as a kid when he was throwing a fit, you'd have to hold him down. Just strong, as thick, strong. I mean, he's still, I mean, at 15 years old, he's 240 pounds and kind of 6 foot, you know.
Huge.
Big. I mean, when he has issues at school and they need to have behavior support, he's happy it takes 4 punks to hold him down, you know. And I'm not so happy about that, but it's less frequently, but he's strong. I mean, but the coordination was problematic that I knew I had to try to do. His visual acuity, you know, sight, I'm going to kind of go out on a limb here and say that I do think video games help train that, because I'm not seeing that with a lot of kids being a problem, at least in a small degree vision field. Now, a bigger degree vision field, you know, my kid's not going to play quarterback, so I'm not really testing this to know. But that wasn't, but the coordination was. So I was trying to figure out, you know, how do I develop this balance, stability, coordination, and based upon off what I know, and we've had this conversation before. I don't know if we've ever had it on. I think we did when we did the Defining Autism series. I've always known movements as being progressions. Like here's your starting point. You know, you can't do a push-up. You know, you start with a negative push-up, or you start with a kneeling push-up, or you start just laying on the floor. And, you know, quickly I realized that this shit ain't working. Like, what the hell? Am I going to have him do a reverse band kneeling? Like, this is ridiculous. This can't be this. He's too strong. And there were regressions that you knew that weren't really physical. They were more mentally related. Like, you know, the kid doesn't like laying on the dirty floor. You know, it's like, oh, fuck, never thought about, who would think about that? You know, and then years later we determined he didn't like squatting because he grew up watching people straining and bloody noses and grunting, and, you know, people squatting 900 pounds, which is cool as hell to me. You know, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, they associate that with pain. So it's like, hey, let's squat. No. You know, and we're still working on that one, you know, on the days that he comes in with me. It's like, well, let's squat. Now, you know, let's do this. And I've got him a couple times, but the regressions, I think, from a training standpoint to those people who work with kids that they think are on the spectrum or may not, or are in the spectrum, talk about that a little bit. Because that was the one thing that was, to me, I really don't know what the hell I'm doing. It's like I know training, but this was like it turned my world upside down. It's like I know how to build the building, like from here up, and I know how to build a base, but there's still shit under the base, you know. I'd have the plumbing or whatever it is. Right. I had no clue.
I think something that comes right to mind, and it's not like squat related, but it's jump rope related. Having a child that had an experience in gym class where they had a jump rope, and they couldn't do it, but that's what they had to do, and then they were made to feel stupid, or maybe they had to go sit, you know, against the wall. So now that immediate association that they have with that jump rope is like pure evil, stupid, I'm not good enough, you know. So if that's something, so you can relate that to, like, say, the squat. For example, if Blaine looks at the squat and he thinks of, you know, guys that are bleeding out of their face and they're in pain, well, he surely doesn't want to do that. So we know that the squat movement is an important thing that we need to do some way, shape, or form. And so how are we going to be able to, like, backtrack, regress, so that we can start to lay that plumbing, so that we can start to build that foundation, and then we have the house where you're really good at that part. There's a lot of different ways. If we go back to, say, the jump roping, so now we are trying to change those behavioral assumptions, or those negative associations. And with Blaine, there were tons of negative associations with many different, where it could be a location in the gym, or it could have been a particular piece of equipment. And, you know, I keep on saying Blaine is just more so that we're having a conversation, but I hope that, you know, those that are listening, that they're taking that into their own situation and they're thinking of their child based on his needs. But
well, it's good to say that as well too, and keep your train of thought. Don't let me get you off that, because when they go to the supplemental, material that we provided, they're going to see all the articles that you wrote that are detailing his training. So it will make a lot more sense to them having this context to be able to see why there's a line, why there's a chalk line. Yeah, I'm telling your story right now.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So if we go back to the jump rope, we have a child where we're like, you know what, he has to do this in gym and he hates the jump rope. How can we regress so we can get him back so that, he's able to do this and he doesn't have this fear. So in my mind, well, then I take the play route. So now I look at a jump rope. I don't look at it as a jump rope anymore. I think of it maybe as a snake, right? And so I'm working with a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or even 11-year-old. And so now we're like, okay, well, we're going to play with this snake today. And today we're going to lay it flat on the floor and we're just going to walk over it. And, you're going to see the child be like, what? Have you lost your mind? Because we're so deeply ingrained into this label of this is a pen, right? The only thing that I can do with it is write. Well, that's not true. I could stab somebody or whatever. There's a lot of different things that I could do with this pen. So that's what you have to do with, say, the squat.
That's really the first thing that came to your mind.
Well, I was thinking of this movie that I watched where he could literally create a weapon out of anything, and that was a pen. But the same thing with the squat. You know what I mean? Yes, the squat is the squat, but rather than putting a bar on our back, let's pick up pennies, right? So let's do that squat movement, but the child's not thinking that he's squatting. I'm not even using the word squatting. When I'm looking at that jump rope, I'm not even going to say jump rope. I'm just going to hand this and say, okay, this is a snake for today. So those regressions sometimes start cognitively where we're not labeling whatever we're doing as what it is because there's already been such cruel association with it. So bands are the same thing, maybe, like, the way that they smell, the way that they feel, that tactile type of thing. Your child might have something that's like, I don't want to do anything with these bands, but pick up that, don't even consider it a band, and let's say we're going to play tug of war with it, So now we don't think of it as a band, it's just something that we're going to play this, like, exceptional game. And then slowly, once you make those progressions with that regression, then you end up to the barbell is on your squat because naturally that's where it just led you. It's the same thing that you're talking about, like off-site training. Well, we need to build that base, and naturally we're going to get there. It might take us 2 years. It might take us 3 years, 5 years, but naturally we're going to get there through the jump rope. Maybe we're starting off we're pretending it to be a snake, and then we're going to play tug of war with that, and then we're going to the play and all of that, it's going to escalate in a sense to eventually we get to actually using it to jump rope, So I don't know if that answers your question, but you mentioned too the 18 exercises your child wants to do. So this is like all of those types of games that are going to be using like things that we would be able to say, okay, well, this might pertain to the squat, or this might pertain to, say, flexibility, but we're not relaying that to the child. The child is going to perceive this as fun and games and play and totally reassociating everything to something that is just silly, Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I just wanted to make sure that those listening, got an idea that, because they're probably coming from the same type of background that I came from, and while I work on a higher level of strength athlete, it's even with that though, with the majority of the people, because my profession is not training powerlifters, it's what I do for fun, and I love it, this is why I do it, and I only like to work with those who want to be at the very best. Well, even because of that, sometimes when we'll do a learn to train seminar or a seminar where we're bringing in low, intermediate, or beginner powerlifters, I have a really hard time picking up things that, JP, Joe Sullivan, some of the other ones are just like, boom, that's it. I'm like, oh God, I'm so far removed. It's like I'm looking at all the complicated things that 95% of any power lifter would never even have to contend or deal with. That's where my brain goes first, which made it even worse when you're talking about going even lower, you know, on that spectrum, to where I would be the worst PE teacher of all time. You know, it's, you know, sit down, you know, shoulders back, chest, you know, breathe through your nose, finish with your mouth. You know, I'd be teaching them all this shit, you know, on how to brace, you know, and all this crap that they don't need to know. But it still comes down to, from a training perspective, that I think we need to drive the message home. I don't know if we need to speak about it more, is communication is key. Even when, you know, I'm trying to help, you know, in JP or Ted or, you know, some of the guys, all the slamming of the weights that people were hearing, you know, I'm sure there'll be comments about it. When we do these table talks, they are in the middle of the gym. They're always going to be in the middle of the gym. This is our podcast. You know, our culture stems from the gym. So everything we do is going to be in the gym. So, you know, there's going to be deadlifts that are bouncing sometimes. There's going to be people squatting sometimes. Other times it's just going to be quiet. It's the way it is. It's who we are. That's what we do. But when I'm working with them, especially if I'm not really doing any of their programming, because they've got to a point where they kind of know what they're doing, it's all verbal and nonverbal communication, probably nonverbal more so than anything. Like, where's he at? I know his strut. You know, I know what a good strut is. I know what a bad strut is. I know what a strut is when he's pissed. I know what a strut is when he's not in a good mood. I know when it's a not a good mood, which he has sometimes. I know when it's not a good mood, like we need to like reset, you know, maybe come back later. I know it with Ted. I know with all of them. It's the nonverbal communication. The trick is, you know, it's nonverbal is kind of, for me, it's easier to pick up on. Verbal with these guys is pretty easy because they just lie. You know, it's just, they just lie. You know, it's, oh yeah, I feel great. No, nobody ever feels great. That's bullshit. You feel good, or you feel like, you know, I'm fine. It's the biggest lie. That's the biggest lie ever told. I'm fine. You know, that's bullshit. You just don't want to talk about it, which is cool. You know, I get that. But verbal communication with somebody who has ASD, good luck. Good luck. All you have is nonverbal. And that is hard. I know it as a parent for my own child, you know, but, you know, if you think that you're going to set up a personal training studio, all you're going to do is work with autistic kids, you're going to bring in all kinds of money and it's going to be stress-free and you're just going to kick ass, you're sadly mistaken. You're going to be in business for 3 days and go out of business and want to shoot yourself. Well, I shouldn't say that, but, you know, you're going to want to reassess everything, because a lot of the things that we rely on just subconsciously as humans, you know, from nonverbals, is really, it not only is it disrupted, it's so different with each one, at least with, what do you call normal, neurotypical people? A lot of nonverbals are kind of the same. You know, a lot of people are going to look down, you know, if they're not interested, they're going to be like looking all over the place. And I mean, you got the ASD, they're like, yeah, they're fully engaged. And what, did you hear me? No. You know, it's so the communication key is huge, but you have to learn how your kiddo, as many of them call them, or your ASD child or whoever it is, you have to learn how they communicate. Most parents hopefully are doing a good job with that. If it's somebody who's working with somebody with ASD, I can say almost across the board, I'm going to need some validation or you to tell me that I'm wrong. If you ask them a yes or no question, you're probably never going to get an answer. You know, or you can just assume if they don't answer you, it's either always yes or it's either always no. You know, it's like they choose whichever one it is.
Or you have to, as the person that's asking the question, it has to be very specific, where if it requires a yes and no, then it should be displayed in a yes or no. Like maybes just with again, it's just with, I can think of just some examples where maybe it was like the worst thing. It's like, is it black or is it white? Like, yes or no. There's no gray line here, but yeah, one thing too that you're talking about too with just the communication aspect, something that from a doctor that I've just learned so much from that I want to put out there as a resource would be Dr. Annette Baniel. So if you look her up, just the way that you communicate with everyone. So when we're thinking of like our schedule and what we want to accomplish, right? Well, what are we relaying to the child? So if you know that, the squat, maybe in 10 years into your training, now you're actually learning the squat. Are you, in your mind as the trainer or the coach or the parent, are you in your mind thinking, well, this needs fixed? If you're thinking that needs fixed, that the child is broken, then the child's going to feel that without you even saying it. So like those nonverbal things, it's how are you walking into that session? Where's your mind at? Are you there to make this child, create one little like sliver of progress? And are you going to celebrate that today? Or are you just going to think, well, we just, we added 5 pounds to this, or something so small, like maybe the child would never even put his hand on the bar, right? And today he put his hand around the bar. Well, that's something that you have to celebrate. That's huge. And if you're going to celebrate it, then the child's going to be like, holy crap, like, first off, I can do something right. I don't need fixed. I'm good, so that transcends. But things that I've learned from Dr. Nat Benyal. So the book name is Kids Without Limits. So she has like 9 essentials, and they're just things that will blow your mind, that you don't even realize how you're treating a child or just another human being. Another thing that would be slow. So like right now we're talking fast, we're excited. If you were going to go and teach me how to deadlift, it's going to be okay. Boom, boom, boom. I want you here. I want your hips here. I want your, everything like that, where let's try to do it slow. Like if I ended up like, I don't get it, or you're like, Sheena, what the hell are you doing? Maybe your instinct would be like, all right, we're going to accessory work. Your hips are just weak as hell. So, but maybe if we were to go slow and you were to approach like a portion of that, like you yourself actually slowed down, and you noticed that I was getting huffy and puffy because your demeanor changed.
Yes.
And now you're going to mentally slow me down. Like that's just one aspect, but there's 9 essentials, and those are things like I've written a book, which I'm trying to get published, in that process, but that I talk about her as that is like such a resource, which is going to help you in that communication, that process, because that is so important. It's not about butt back, anything like that. It's what's your demeanor? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you telling that child without even saying anything? What are you celebrating? What really is your end goal? Like if you're the parent and you want your child to be a starter on the soccer team, and if that's your only interest, well, that's going to transcend. Like the child is going to pick that up. They're going to end up resenting you, or we see that they don't want to play anymore because they know if they don't meet the marker, they're going to upset their dad. So those are all the things that. And Dr. Annette Baniel is, that's her realm is special needs. So she's working with children with autism and, ADD, ADHD, cerebral palsy, all these things. So she has like a pretty big network to pull from, or a pot to pull from. But it's just amazing if you can wrap your brain like. And what I did when I first was introduced, I think I wrote an article and somebody commented, "Have you checked out this lady's work?" And I was like, huh. So that's how I found out about it. But even in the book, it's just suggesting like try slow, for a month, and how can you incorporate that and see, like observe, did that change anything with what you were trying to accomplish? And if so, keep doing it. And then in a couple more weeks, try this. So now we're going to go with enthusiasm. How does that affect it? and then it's just amazing. So she has really, without knowing it, has really shaped the way, like my way, like when I worked in the public school system, like it seemed fake may come to mind, but it was just so, like the curriculum, the way that you were supposed to teach it, you're in this building, the standards, all of that, it just seemed foreign to me, you know, like, but that was my schooling up to that point with, you know, college and whatnot. But like naturally I was like, this is not how I would start this lesson. This is not how I would, like, my point is not for the kids to pass this test in a week because, right? Like my reasoning is because of this, and this. And the way that I knew to do that just eternally was this, and this. So when I read her book, you know, I'm thinking I'm weird, you know, like this doesn't translate to the classroom. Other teachers that I'm talking to, they're like, what? So when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, like she gets it. And obviously she really got it and was able to put her doctrine and all of that to the test and the research and all of that. But it was just like somebody that was speaking your language. So maybe that's a language you would never even try to understand. But then once you read it, you're like, oh, I could do that. And then you'd see how it would transcend. Whereas other people would be like, this is how I communicate. I didn't know that this was, sometimes we need to know if this was like, quote unquote, right or wrong.
Yes.
Like somebody else has thought about this. Okay, I'm not the only one. And then you have some confidence that I'm going to do this and see how it works. So that's kind of where that fell. But
yeah, I'm going to definitely check that out, because the way that I've coached, I guess even work as a leader, and I guess you can attest to this because you've been here long enough, is I got a lot of different leadership styles. I'm not the best leader in the whole world, and I'm willing to admit that 100%. But I do care if the people who work for me or the people I'm working with succeed or not, you know, over the long run. You know, I hope they all feel that way. You know, now temporarily, if somebody's screwing, you know, things always are kind of like in a little weird wavy type of place. But I think you can have those weird wavy type of places if they know long term that they really care that if I get better or not. You know, if it's here or the next career or whatever it's going to be, or if it's a power lifter in here, if they're going to end up going the Westside or wherever they're going to go. As long as they know that I actually give a fuck, I think that gives me a little bit more latitude. But I do run out of options, because it's okay, I could be the dickhead. Yeah, not in the gym. I'm more so.
right.
There's certain things you just can't do in an office that you do in the gym, and sometimes it works great. You know, for the people out here, you got to get in your head. You know, other times you got to be more positive. You know, and you got to move it around, or quiet. Sometimes loud, sometimes quiet. Slow is something that I've not tried, so I'm very interested to see what some of the other 9 are, because it gives more options. Because for me, and this is just being selfish now, if I'm teaching a lift to that intermediate that I'm having a hard time, and you're going through all these different learning cues, modalities, and all this other, sometimes you just get stuck, and I got to pull somebody else in. But what if I tried slow? You know, what if I tried XYZ, which I don't know yet? You know, maybe that would be the answer, because usually whoever comes in is going to say exactly the same thing I did, just in a different way. Or vice versa, if I got to step in. I remember one time, one that learned to trains, it was somebody was having an issue with a deadlift, and it was me, Croc, Jeremy Frey, Dave Kirshen, maybe Brian Carroll, and one other. And then whoever the last one was, which is a shame that I don't remember, because they were the ones that actually got it through. It may have actually been an attendee, you know, and it was like, you know, afterwards we're all looking at each other like, son of a bitch just said the same thing, you know, but it was a little bit different. Josh, let's nail some questions. There's one I definitely want to hit, which was a longer one dealing with IEP, and it was one that was a DM to me. Again, don't put the name on there, but there's a couple sections to it. One was about the IEP. The other was about the child not relating. It was a stepchild.
How do I know if it's in DM?
I got them titled. I got Dave's Instagram one. The DM's going to be a big image. Because I had to screenshot it.
You got 1 minute here.
Okay, well, while you're looking up the second part of that, the first part was about an IEP, and in the resource that we provided that we've talked about, there is I don't want to say her name, but I don't know if it really would matter at this time. The education meathead was a special education teacher who, when I was writing the Angry Bird series, was a very interesting series because I was struggling as a parent at a time, because this was when we were dealing with the diagnosis and the school systems, and oh my God, the school systems, and all the things that parents have to deal with this. Yes, that's the one. And the IEP was one of them, and I had a big problem with that because I didn't want my kid to be labeled. I mean, a huge problem with that because I was labeled, and I had to fight that. I didn't fight it, but I had to deal with it my whole educational career. And the way that I dealt with it is I took the easy route. It's like, oh, you're learning disabled. You can take biology, but hey, you can take rock science. So I can take rock science and not do anything. And I didn't ask that question, but essentially that's what it was. It's like, here, you can take English, or you can just go in this class and read magazines. What the hell is a 13-year-old going to do? Mad Magazine, Flex Magazine, I'm good to go. Powerlifting USA. So I fought that really, really hard, and Tracy and I had a lot of arguments about it, and I came to the realization that, my kid is not me, that you can't be selfish and you got to do what's best for your child. And the fact of the matter is, read what the special education meathead, wrote. It's very good. It goes into far more detail than I can, but every state's different. Every state gives more support and more help. If you don't have an individual education program, which is the IEP, through your school system, your child's going to get zero additional help. So if your child can't deal with being in a full classroom when they take a test, tough shit. They're staying in the full classroom taking a test. You have an IEP done where there's testing and so forth, well, then maybe they can sit in the hallway, or maybe they can sit in a private class, or maybe they get, more tutoring. Maybe they get smaller class sizes. Blaine was on the extreme end, so he didn't work in the public school system. So with that IEP, we tried homeschooling first, which, because it was part of the IEP, the teachers had to come to the house, which, thankfully we own our own business, which helps, but it doesn't help. I mean, you still got to work the same 100 hours a week, but there's flexibility with the hours. So they would, come to the house and teach, and then we found, this isn't really working as well. And then that's when, we found Hagelin, which is, again, because the IEP, they have to have the IEP for that. The state covers that because I still pay taxes just like everybody else. So my child's able to go to I guess you could say a private, autism school, which isn't really private. It's still, state funded. The transportation costs, all these things are covered because of his IEP. Now, I'm not saying that IEP is going to mean your kid's going to have to go to a private facility. But if he was in public school, I couldn't tell you where my kid would be right now. He would not be in the position he's in now, for certain. But and if I would have fought against that, and he would have been in this far worse position, a special ed class, something like that, it's not his fault. He's a 3 or 4, 5. That would have been my fault. And I think that's what a lot of these parents don't realize is they're making these emotional decisions for their children, which are going to impact their children, which then turn out to be 100% their fault, because they had a choice to make. So because they didn't want their kid to be labeled ASD, their kid could end up far worse because of their own fear or insecurities or whatever.
Yeah, tons of.
You know, and it kills me because if I get engaged in a conversation with a parent about this, I'm usually pretty civil about it. I never scream or yell or anything like that at people, but I'll get to the point where I'll tell them and I'll ask them, you know, would you do anything for your child? And I usually ask this before the conversation even starts. Like, hey, you know, what do you think about the school systems? My son, I think he's got ASD. And it's like, well, would you do anything for your kid? Oh, I would do anything for my kid. I set that up ahead of time. So when they start telling me, oh, no, I can't do that. I can't label my kid. So what you're telling me is,
You just lied.
yeah, you won't do anything for your kid. That you'll do anything for your kid as long as it's convenient for you. But you won't do anything for your kid if it's in the best interest of your kid. And then that fucks with them. But if I can just get them to pause for a second, and I'm not saying the IEP is right. And I'm sure many people can post up and make comments and so forth telling me I'm completely full of shit. And I do hope, you know, I don't read the YouTube comments. I never will. Sorry, guys. It's just the way it is. But if anybody has experience with this, good or bad, post. You know, let us know. If anybody has experience that can help any parent that's got a child with, you know, ASD, post your experience, post your resources, post it up. You know, this is what social media is for. This is what the comments are for.
Send us an article.
Yeah, send us an article. Share it, especially, I mean, if it's been an adverse story, share, because I'll tell you what, the best thing I ever did was share it, because it got it off of my chest and it helped me deal with it. And I had a hard time dealing with it. I'm not going to lie about that. But it made things easier because now it's out in the open. And now, you know, I said things that I'm not going to say I regret, but I took a couple slaps at my own family, you know, because you deal with that, because you got family members that saying, you know what, you don't discipline your kid well. I'm like, oh, you little fucker. You have no idea. You know, this kid's been throwing a fit for 3.5 hours and you think it's because I don't spank him? You know, it's ridiculous. But the older you get, the more mature you get, and this is to some of the other parents out there, you're going to say things to your family members that, or you're going to regret. They're going to forgive you. You know, they just don't know any better. Now, shit, we're 15 years removed from that time. People are more educated. People now, God, there were so many people saying, what can I do to help my brother, sister, aunt, you know, because I really want to help. The easy answer to that is just ask them what you can do to help. That's very simple. They'll know. What was the second part of that, Josh?
I can pull it up, but there was a question on does having a child with autism change the manner in which you discipline him that you kind of touched upon? Did you want to go into that more, or do you want me to pull up the other one?
While you're pulling up the second part to the IEP one that you did show it to me when you flashed me over the paper.
That was the second part?
There was two parts to it. One was the IEP, then there was another part, which was pretty significant. But how do you discipline a child with ASD? We're going to get into a weird territory here, because you're talking about parenting and you're talking about discipline, and you're going to be talking about it. It's going to be no different than you're going to discipline any other child. You know, it's based upon what your own parenting philosophies are, maybe religious philosophies and all this other kind of stuff. If you have a kid that has a sensory processing disorder, which I do believe almost everybody with ASD has a sensory processing disorder, if you think spanking them is going to make any difference, you're sadly mistaken.
Yeah, now you're just providing another stimulus that they have to try to organize.
Yes. And they won't stop. I mean, it's when they're young. Here's from my personal experience with a child that threw tantrums and had meltdowns that would last 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours. It gets better. You know, when they get older, it gets better. They learn how to cope. That you once you start to understand a little bit of how their mind works, like they get angry, they get upset. And Blaine would get angry, he'd get upset. And then he's crying and he's screaming. And then he can't remember why he's angry and upset. So now he's angry and he's upset because he can't remember why he's angry and upset. And it just starts this whirlpool effect that just, the best thing you can do is just leave them alone. You know, just let them settle down. Now, sometimes it ends up they're public, you know, so you can try compressing. There's weight vest. I mean, there's all kinds of crap people are selling you, but the best compression is hugging a child. You know, it's you know, for somebody to pull out a weight vest and put it on a child when they're in public, unless they're not their mother, father, or whatever it is, if there is some reason why they're not allowed to, instead of hugging a child, is a little whack, you know, to me. And then you just deal with it, you know, and just let them settle down. Once they get over it, they're not going to remember why. One of the things still with Blaine as a teenager now, if we discipline, it's taking things away. It doesn't work. You know, it's never worked. I don't know why we even keep trying to do it, because we'll say, look, we're going to take away your iPad. First question is, how long? I'm like, oh shit, here we go. 5 minutes. Well, he's mad. It doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes, 5 days, 10, he'll still throw a fit. Okay, now it's 10 minutes. Then it gets even worse. Okay, a half an hour. Now it gets even worse, 2 hours. And he's not comprehending that this means 2 hours compared to when it was just, and we're like, dude, if you just would have settled down, it would have been 2 minutes. Now we're up to like 3.5 weeks and he doesn't care. And it's like, this doesn't work. You know, it just doesn't work. Fortunately, now that he's old enough, we can let him throw his fit. And my biggest concern is he is big, you know, so he needs to learn how to manage his anger and do so in a way that's not going to hurt himself or somebody else. And we'll get there, you know, but when he has a meltdown at school, you know, it's usually punching himself in the face and stuff like this. And I'm only saying this because I'm sure other parents are dealing with the same thing, and it's real. You know, I don't want to sit here and say, look, you know, they're all perfect kids. You know, it's when I said it takes 4 behavior specialists to hold them down. That's what it takes. You know, and imagine if I had him actually squatting and benching and, you know, lifting to his potential. It'd take the whole school to hold this kid down. But that's not my concern. My concern is what's going to happen in 3 years when he graduates and he has a meltdown in a store someplace, and then it's a security guard and then the police force, and then they're holding him down, and then there becomes that issue. So the discipline question becomes, you're just going to have to learn as you go and do the best that you can, the same way any parent can. Now I can let him have his issues, and usually I get a school report from his school is fantastic, by the way. They're great. So I get very good detailed reports. He'll come home, he knows he's screwed up, so he'll go rest. And then he'll come up and then we'll just talk about it. And it's like, well, okay, here's the issue, you know. And yoga was the last one. He doesn't like gym. He hates gym, which is
dance
odd.
class is
the yoga, man. This yoga thing was driving him nuts. He's like, I'm going to get thrown out of school. He's like, I'm gonna have write-ups every single day. And then a few days ago, he's like, I think I figured the yoga thing out. He's like, I can still get a 6, which is how they tally the classes, but I don't really have to do the poses. And I'm like, well, what? He says, I got 3 different plans. And I said, well, what are they? He says, well, I'm just going to sit, but then I'm going to stretch. So he's going to sit in the chair, then stretch, like a hamstring stretch, back, chest. He says, chair yoga. And and he says, that's the first one. If that doesn't work, I got a couple backups. So he came back, and a couple of days later, he was like, you remember the plan I was telling you about? It works. You know, so that's the part where, you know, that's what you like to see as a parent. No, I don't like the fact that he's getting himself out of yoga and learning stupid yoga skills, or they're having the kids do it so they learn how to relax. I like the idea that he found a way to get himself out of it, which was still compliant, which still worked, and didn't end up with him being in behavior support. You know, he fought his way through it to be able to pull it off, which is great from that standpoint. Did you find that?
Yeah. So do you want me to read this whole one, or just this part?
Not the whole thing, just the small part. Yes, that small part.
Okay, starting with he's addicted to video games.
Yes.
Okay. So it says he's addicted to video games, of course, and will disappear right in front of me like he's not there. I've been with him since he was 3, going on 6 years. He was nonverbal, not potty trained then, and used to cling to me. Selfishly, I miss that. He's doing good in school from what I know, but the communication from the biological mom is very poor. Any suggestions you have for how I can help him feel at home?
Okay, that's good. I'll answer this, and I'll have Sheena answer it as well. So we'll go 2 different directions here. Addicted to video games, like I said before, most kids are. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I wouldn't worry about that. That's an escape. When you're saying that what was the exact terminology? He escapes from me, or he disappears?
Right in front of my eyes, he disappears.
He's not disappearing. He's still there. He's there. He hears what you're saying. He sees you. He feels your presence. He knows your presence. He knows you're there. There's one thing as a parent, and as a parent with ASD, that's always been super important to me, is just to be there. And even as a spouse, to take it further than that. It doesn't matter if you're having conversation or not having conversation. If you're just there, it matters. And if it's somebody that is on the spectrum, so she's using an example of, a child playing the video games, and I'll use the example of Blaine. I want to be home every day he gets home from school. I want to be there. I know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to walk in the door, he's going to go rest, he's going to get something to eat, then he's going to come up and he's going to start, playing on his computer. And it maybe we'll talk. Mm-hmm. Maybe it will be 3 or 4 days, and there's no dialogue at all. But I'm still doing my work. I have my laptop right there. It's not like I'm not working. But I'm there. Mm-hmm. I'm 10 feet away. He's in a little cubby in his little office. I'm right there. But on that 4th day, we sit there and we talk for 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. I'm there. If I wasn't there, that 45-minute conversation never happened. Mm-hmm. All right. So if it was, and this is just basic relationship advice, I guess. Yeah. If it's a spouse and you're just there and you go 5 days, you don't talk, but then on the 6th day, you have this really meaningful, conversation. That's more than, hey, how was your day? Fine. What do you do? Everyday bullshit. Mm-hmm. At least you're there for it to happen, because shit like that doesn't happen on schedule. And anybody, maybe I'm just old, anybody that's been around for a while knows that kind of stuff just doesn't happen. It's not like, hey, we need to sit down, we need to talk about serious shit. Well, right there's a red flag. You're not going to talk about one damn thing serious. Everybody's going to try to avoid whatever. And it certainly isn't going to happen with somebody with, hey, we're going to sit down and talk, with an autistic. Yeah, right. Good luck with that. He's going to say, hey, you know what? And come flaring out of the office. And it could be about a cartoon. It could be about a video game. It could be about this kid at school, Carlos, that he can't stand. It could be about all this other stuff. But I'm there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, they're still, you're still present, even if you think you're looking right through them. Mm-hmm. It's just, that's easier to feel that way when the nonverbals are so much harder to read. Mm-hmm. That might not even be a bad thing, because when you can read the nonverbals, say it's a neurotypical person, and then you may be reading shit that's completely wrong. Mm-hmm. Like, fucker isn't talking to me, or she isn't talking to me because she's pissed at me right now. And that's usually me, because I got a pissed off look all the time. Mm-hmm. So he hasn't said anything because he's mad as hell. Well, that's not the case here. So it actually might be a good thing, So it could be from that standpoint. So just being there matters so much more. So I think with that question there, with that person, they're kind of getting wrapped up in creating a false narrative on what's really going on with that. That was the whole thing, right? The video games, and then the IEP. So I'll let you, if you have anything to add.
Like at the end, what was the actual question? What is he trying to solve?
Give me a minute here.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
They feel disconnected, and they have a biological mother So there's a restriction. There's a gate. The biological mother wants nothing to do with the IEP. So I don't know what advice to give there. So I think that's just kind of maybe
just that she's not there, or that they're not communicating as much as she wants. It seems like
she wants to communicate more with the child.
But that's not going to be on her terms, is what I'm understanding you guys are saying.
Yeah, I guess I don't really have much to.
Yeah.
I think the way that you pinpointed it was as best as from a parenting rule for me to chime in on that. I think we'll move on to the next one.
I mean, just being there, it matters. It really does.
Okay. We can backtrack here. I got 5 or 6 from this person.
Okay.
First one was, what sort of advice or feedback can you give to parents who are still learning to manage a new diagnosis of their child?
Listen to people. Listen to your gut first, because you're going to be bombarded by people trying to sell you supplements, to people trying to sell you blood work, people trying to sell you cures, people trying to, this is where the IEP, this is kind of where it becomes an issue, because it just becomes part of this whole other giant mountain of mess that everybody is trying to push on you, because you're in a vulnerable state, because you're stressed and you don't know what to do. And when people are stressed and don't know what to do, predators prey. So find somebody, if you can, that your gut tells you can help you navigate. And within most school systems, and I hope almost all now, should be somebody that can help you do that. You know, because there's always somebody to help with the IEP. Even if it is a small school system, like London is a very small school system. They're still smaller, but it's a small school system, and we still found somebody that was able to help us to say here and give us the real deal, you know, and basically say, you know, this may not be the place for you off the record, but here are some options, and here's, you know, sensory processing, and, you know, and there's enough people now that I think you can build that contact that's not going to be some type of sales generated solution. And that would be my biggest advice is, you know, everybody wants to make money on you, you know, because that would be the first thing. The second thing is if you have a spouse, more than likely you're not going to always be on the same page. That's okay. You know, you're going to fight. That's going to happen. There is, from what I determined, and I've misquoted this before in the past because of my own ignorance of not looking it up, there is not a higher divorce rate amongst those people who have children on the spectrum. It's the same as any. It may actually be just a tad bit better, but it's not really that significant. But embrace the differences and talk about them. You know, just don't compromise and say, okay, you get this one, I get this one. Because ultimately you're going to have to be on the same page. Lastly is you have to advocate for your child. And you can't, if you're going to walk out of a room and you're worried that everybody in that room just thought you were the biggest dickhead in the world or the biggest bitch in the world, who cares? You can't care, because that's going to be the case. You know, I can name a couple examples and tell stories about it, but you know, there are probably moments that I'm not going to say that I'm proud of, but there are moments that I stood up for my child more than anybody else. And you know, I guess one I'll touch on real quick. It was one with a school system, and we were supposed to meet and speak about his education plan, and only one of the teachers were there out of 6. So I personally got up and went and got the other 5 out of their classroom and made them come down and sit, because they didn't have the time to be able to do that. Were they pissed? Oh yeah, they were pissed. Did they know I was serious about my son's education? Yes, but here's the thing with this, and everybody thinks, oh man, that's, you know, I don't want to put myself in that spot. I don't want to look like an asshole. Or other people think, hell yes, you know, I want to be the badass. But the message I never had a problem after that, and it wasn't because I was aggressive, and it wasn't because I was assertive. It was because the teachers knew I actually gave a fuck. All right. You have to understand as how the school system really works. And I think there's a disconnect there too. You know, people bitch about teachers left and right, but teachers also have a lot of kids. They're teaching a lot of kids. I mean, I can't give a percentage on this, but if teachers are watching this, tell me I'm wrong, you know, on the comments, who are trying to teach kids that their parents could give two shits if their kids are even in school or not, or if they even learn anything or not. They don't come to the conferences. They don't care about their kids. It's just a babysitting service. So if that is, just say half, if that's half of all the kids that are in their classroom, and then you come in and then you have a slight concern, they're going to think you're the same as the other half. Now you raise your, I'm not saying you need to be a bitch or an asshole about it, but you show your concern about it and you show that you're real about your concern about it. Now you have that teacher's attention. And it's not that the teacher's going to sit and think, yes, they might be mad that day, but the next day they're going to think, thank God I got somebody who's got a kid that they give a shit about. And now you got somebody that becomes an advocate. You know, it's just a shame it takes that, but that's kind of the world that we live in with that. So if you can't advocate for your own child, nobody else will. And fourth, I could go on forever. You're going to make mistakes. You know, we all do. You're just going to make mistakes. It's just the way it is. We're all parents. You know, there's no rule book. You know, there's no handbook on this. You know, every child is different regardless of the child. And that is what it is. So.
Did you want to touch on that, Sheena?
No, I'm good on that. Like, when they're parenting, I'd say let Dave go full throttle on it.
Okay, well, there's a few more from that person.
Let me toss one out while I'm thinking about it, because I do know it's in there somewhere, but this will be a cool one because she'll be able to give a different perspective or a different answer, maybe even the same answer. But I made a post not too long ago, and it goes back. The story behind the post is a few years ago, Blaine and I were on the swimming pool on vacation. We play a stupid game called Monster in the Corner. So we come up with these different games, and it's whoever stays in the corner wins. So you try to fight the other person out of the corner. Well, you know, I'm crippled, got broken hips, my shoulder hurts. So now he's big, you know, so he actually stands a chance of winning. Plus he still has a problem with winning and losing. So somehow or another, I got to make sure before the vacation's over, he ends up being victorious for the whole thing. But he gets loud, he has fun, you know, he plays, and you know, we have a good time. And a couple years back, one of the parents or somebody who was in the pool just looked at me and said, "Can you calm your kid down?" And I looked at him and said, "No." And he gave me this look like, "You ignorant son of a bitch," you know, and fuck, whatever. You know, we just went about our own thing. He grabbed his shit and left. And the reason I do that, and the reason, and you know, I can give other examples of, you know, him pressing all the buttons in the elevator, and somebody like, you know, really? Then my reply would be, yeah. You know, and I am not going to ever say, and I used to do this, I apologize, my son has autism. I will never say that. Not with him present. Now, I will talk to him later, like, "Hey, Blaine, you shouldn't have done, you know, maybe we want to keep it down." You know, when nobody else is around, I will parent. All right, but I am not going to provide him the option to have a victim card that he can think in his own mind, "Hey, I can do this because I have autism." No, he can be himself the same way everybody else can be himself. You know, there's no way I'm going to give anybody else that parenting trump card, you know, for that. Even if his behavior is completely off base, I'm still going to look and say, basically some snide ass remark that says, "I don't really care. You're indifferent to me." And leave it at that. That's how I handle it as a parent and have for many years, because one time I saw, it was an elevator situation, and I did say that, and I had Bryce in the elevator with me, And now I got both of my kids in the elevator. And all I thought to myself immediately after I said it is, what message did I just send my kids? Just because I wanted to take the comfortable route. Because it's always more comfortable to say, I'm sorry because, you know, and it's like, fuck that. I don't know this person. I'll never see this person again. I don't give two shits what they think about me. They don't care about my, you know, I'm completely indifferent. Now, different situation. You got 3 or 4 kids at Skype Jump or a restaurant or whatever it is, and they're getting a little loud. They're getting a little. Now somebody comes up to you and they say, hey, look, can you, and let's say the kids are in earshot range, or let's just assume if they're not in earshot range, yes. You know, more than likely you're going to say, you know, look, because it's a point to educate. Okay, that you never want to, as a parent, you never want to miss that point to educate. Don't be a dickhead to somebody if your kids are not in earshot range. Then you can tell them, you know, look, he's a little excited right now. He is on the spectrum. And then, oh, okay. Then everybody, I've never met a person yet that was like, oh, fuck. They're like, oh, fuck, I'm sorry. It's like, no, don't be sorry. You have every right. All right. Now, when the kids are in earshot range, do you change your narrative, or have you not thought about it?
I'm trying to think. Like, there's really haven't been in a situation where it's like I have to excuse or apologize or anything along those lines. You know, just more basic of the principles. Like if the guys are doing something and it's just not respectful, well, it's not respectful. Yeah. So it's just like, hey, you know, like, but it just depends. Are you going to be able to have that conversation with them and say, hey, I know you guys are having fun, but can you bring it down a little bit? Well, yeah, they understand. Yeah. And then there was no need to play the autism card because that was just a basic thing, regardless of, you know, what the situation was. It's considerate just in general. Now, if the
hold that thought, because let me backtrack on that, because you just made a great point that I didn't expand on. If they are saying something inappropriate or you know, sexually inappropriate, usually is the case a lot of the times. Yes, correct them. You know, if you're the parent, correct them. If you're a caregiver, correct them, and make sure they know on that time this is wrong and not to do that. You know, so my example, I should have pointed that out. And like if he was doing something way off the top, then I would have immediately said, you know, bring it down. So I'm glad you brought that up, because there's different levels of getting crazy, and sometimes they don't quite do a good job of that. So please go ahead.
Yeah, and then I'm just thinking of other situations where it goes into that planning, so to speak. So like if we're going to, like every single year we go, it's a tradition of ours that we go to the Spaghetti Warehouse, and you've gone there down in Columbus. It's busy, 2 floors. You have a ton of waitresses, waiters, you know. So when I make the reservation, just from what I've seen, like I'm asking them, hey, I'm going to have a group. So I'm on the phone. Obviously, I'm not with the guys and having this conversation with them, but like planning for that, because I just know the tendencies. Not everyone's going to be good with money. Not everybody's going to give a tip. Or I will have to urge the kid, hey, can you, like, how much did that cost? Okay, 10%. But like that conversation with that company is, hey, on this particular day, I'm going to have a group of 20 to 25 guys. They're all high functioning autism. They all have a high functioning autism. Can we please have an area on the second floor that is kind of not secluded, but we're not going to be next to a 8-year-old birthday party. So I try, just from what I've experienced, like I know those triggers for my guys, you know, I know the triggers for Blaine and whoever I'm working with. So like in that I'm going to make every possible, you know, effort of myself to make sure that we're not going to get in a situation like, because I know if we're next to, you know, an 8-year-old birthday party, I've actually been in that. So I've been in that experience now where, you know, a kid has a balloon and one of our guys is getting hit on the head, and I can just see him, and he's he's getting into that, he's going to lose his shit. You know what I mean? And this happened maybe a couple years ago. This was a brand new guy that just went through the aspirations program, but this was the first time like now in the community with us, you know. So I could just see his whole like inward, and he's going to explode at any moment. So at that point, like it wasn't, hey, 8-year-old boy, he has autism, can you go somewhere else? Like that's not going to translate. I don't know his parents, where they're at or anything. So at that point, I said to the guy, I said, hey, I understand what's going on right now. The kid's being annoying. Your dad's downstairs. Why don't you take a break? Go downstairs, chill out, and then we'll go from there. That's all we needed. He stood up, went down there. So like in that example, like it would have, like even if he didn't have autism, like I wouldn't go to the parent. I wouldn't try to mess up their birthday party, or, hey, kid, you're being an ass or whatever. You know, just very, like, he's older. He's 18 years old that's across from me, and he was who I needed to go to. He's the one that's annoyed. Hey, if you need a couple of seconds, head downstairs. And that's all he needed. He went downstairs, he came back, and, you know, we were able to eat, and there were no problems. So, like, when you're telling me about like the pool situation, like you already know like what this game's about. You know what's gonna like explode, and it's at that point, like in my mind, if I were the parent in that situation, I would just like, okay, we're gonna have a fun time. I know the pool is going to be busy, crazy busy from 2 to 3 p.m. We're gonna go at 4 because it's just our time. You know, I don't have to prove anything that he's socially going to be able to accept some type of criticism, you know. But then that goes into a whole other topic that we can't plan everything, and we can't like make it so that there's no adversity. But I think you just go back to your principles and your values, and then you figure out what is the root problem here, and how can I kind of change it. And I've never had, like, again, I had to play, you know, setting up that the restaurant dinner. Like I did that because I knew we needed a very patient waitress or waiter. I needed somebody that was, you know, if somebody was like, well, what type of pizza is this? And they asked maybe 16 questions about this pizza, that I didn't have a waitress say, really? You know, like I told you already 16 times. So I kind of like safeguard that in a sense, but, otherwise, does that answer a little
See,
bit?
I want to note that I think that it's less now than what I experienced when he was younger, you know, and there were more meltdowns too, but I think that there's a couple. It's kind of a biased answer where I'm always hesitant to kind of go down this path, because I do think that autism awareness is helping. You know, I think people are becoming more aware. They're starting to understand that, you know, maybe this child, you know, has autism. He's not off, or maybe has autism. The other thing I always have to keep in mind is I am 5'11", 290 pounds. So if I'm with my son somewhere and he's doing something a little appropriate, people are going to be a little less inclined to say, hey, can you get your kid under control? Because I don't smile a whole lot and they think I'm going to break their face. So the pool is the only real example I can come up with that has been even recently current. But now you're taking a dude and submerging me in water, you know, so the only thing you really see is my head, you know. And now when I got out of the pool, the guy's probably like, thank God, I shouldn't have said that shit, you know. So I don't know if this is something that a lot of other parents have to deal with. I'm sure they do when they're younger, especially from, you know, other family members, cousins and stuff like that. And so the best advice I can give from that regard is just communication, you know, that civil communication, and, you know, don't send them a million frickin' websites or, you know, all this and all that. You know, just sit down, say, look, this is the deal. This is the behavioral tendencies. Some of them may get better. I don't know if they really grow out of any of them. They just learn how to control them. But don't we? It's there's that's what gets so weird with me with this whole thing is, yes, there's definitely neuro differences, but we all grow up. We all change. Every single one of us are different. So I also have a child with autism, so I have a distorted view.
Right.
What else you got?
And two, just real quickly, then we can kind of talk about Clint a little bit, where we get back to the autism awareness, and then your child is really rambunctious or has a meltdown and whatnot. They're causing a scene. They're annoying somebody, and for that person that's annoyed to say, "Control your kid," Clint Darden gave a great example. Like, this is autism awareness. Like, if that's happening, like, as the awareness of, you don't know the situation, you don't know, like, in Clint's mind, he's saying, he's thinking, well, my son has been up for, he didn't sleep at all, he threw up, or whatever the dialogue was. And as a parent, I'm struggling. Like, I'm trying as best as I can. Can you just give me a break? You know what I mean? Don't tell me. I know my child's having a problem. But that was when we read that, it was just like, oh, like, we're always autism awareness or breast cancer awareness or whatever it may be. We're always thinking about the person that has the quote unquote ailment or whatever the condition may be, the disorder. But we don't think of, well, what about the caregivers? What about that parent? So just something to throw out there.
Yeah, there was a great story, and I don't know if it was Stephen Covey that I read it from, but it's going back in either Brian Tracy, Stephen Covey, Zig Ziglar, stuff that I read many, many years ago, where he told a story of a guy on a train with two children, and the children were completely out of hand, just rambunctious, and a businessman, on the train as well. And the guy didn't give two shits about his kids. They were just raising hell, and the guy just was completely oblivious, didn't give, and just whatever. And the business guy got to a breaking point where he said, "You know what? Can you, settle your damn kids down?" And then the other gentleman said, "I apologize. My wife just died. And my kids are having a hard time dealing with it. I'm having a hard time dealing with it." And now all of a sudden your perspective just completely shifted from, oh my God, this guy's letting these two kids just tear the shit out of the train, into, oh my God, I can't imagine if I was this guy. So I think that's kind of what Clint was trying to say, is sometimes, take a step back.
Yeah.
And I think we can all learn from that.
Yeah.
Okay, what you got?
All right, there's one more from that same one, and this is something you guys can both answer, but it was, what have been some of your favorite learning moments with your son? So, Sheena, with you, with the aspirations, and the kids you work with. So, funny moments or light bulb moments where you learned something, or just, big moments. So whoever wants to start.
First thing that comes to mind is working with a child at a partial hospitalization program, and he's eloping. So he's running away, and at that point I'm like, holy crap, we're right by a highway at that point, and this is going to go really bad. I can't run. And so immediately, like, I'm like, hey, you have a monkey on your back. And he stops. I'm like, oh, thank God. And he turns around, and then we're good. You know what I mean? So it was like immediately changing that whole situation, rather than like, hey, trying to bring on other guys to run him down and take him down. Like, all it needed was to like change the whole thing that was going on, and it immediately, like, we were good. So that, I don't know, that just came to mind as one of those, like, I guess that's not a teachable moment, but one of those moments where you're like, you can change something immediately. It's just how you approach it.
And then maybe if Dave wants to go, you can think of some more, Sheena.
Sure, yeah.
So funny moments or...
Well, I mean, there's always funny moments when you have kids. I can tell story after story just like any parent could. Blaine shit in his pants and when he was a baby and spreading the crap all over the walls in the.
That probably wasn't funny.
No, it was no, it was funny, man. Because I mean, I came home, I'm like, oh my god, there's crap all over the place. How did he get it on the wall? I mean, it was, and he still laughs about it today, and will tell jokes about it. And there's no way he remembers it, because he was too young. But the funny part about that is he still tells stories about it, and there's no way he remembers it, but he thinks it's so funny. But the teachable thing from him is, he taught me to look at the world completely different than what a normal world view would be. Like, I think we can all step out of ourselves and look at things from other people's perspectives in different paradigms, if you will. But the way he sees the world is so different than other people that I'm not going to say I try to get in his mind to figure out what he's trying to see, because I can't, I can't. I mean, just like you can't do that with anybody else. But in certain situations, if it's a stressful or any situation that has me confused or stressed or whatever it is, I ask myself, well, what would Blaine think? Then I laugh, because typically nothing, he wouldn't give a shit. And then I'm like, well, if he wouldn't give a shit,
no issue.
Then should I really be caring about this? So that's probably the biggest thing from him. And, the other thing is I have another sibling. I have another son, which is Bryce, which has taught me patience, because he's kind of a pain in the ass. But I think it's, if you have a child that's on the spectrum, and then you have other children that aren't on the spectrum, you have to be conscious of the narrative. You need to be conscious of, how they get along or how they don't get along. Blaine will tell you Bryce is his nemesis, and I can tell you from day one they have never gotten along. But at the same time, I can tell you that could be the greatest love Blaine can show. Mm-hmm. To this day, I still don't know. But what I do know is there's a lot of attention that seems to be put in one direction, but not a whole lot going in the other. So there has to be, just from a family unit perspective, some semblance of balance or caring, so the other child knows, you're not a caregiver here. Yes, you're going to agitate the shit out of him. Yeah, I would love for you to be a caregiver. I'd love for you to be the person that can take care of him if he needs to be that. But that's not your role. Your role is to grow up and be the best person that you can be. But that does get mixed. At least it has in my household, if I'm going to be completely honest. A lot. So there's a lot of stepping back. So in a way, I can say that Blaine's also taught me that indirectly. That, okay, I need to spend more time caring about the things that Bryce cares about, and less time being so frickin' concerned with, will my son be able to drive when I got another one who's just dying to get his temps? It's fucked up when you think about it. And that's where I get into that almost like Blaine think, where it starts spinning. Like, okay, well, what would Blaine think about this? How can I look at this completely different? And then that's the greatest gift that he's given me, is to be able to look at that completely different and possibly more correctly as a parent.
I have a few. One thing that comes to mind, his name was Sean, probably at the time 10, 11 years old. So he had autism, obviously. And then another thing that he was dealing with at the same time was, like, he had the whole, clef? So he was going through a surgery with that. But, we're training. And it was just, he found a love, or like a passion, which was like hip-hop dancing. So in our training, there were a ton of things that we were trying to accomplish. He had a lot of trouble with like elementary school in the gymnasium aspect, like whatever skill they were doing, he didn't have. We'd have to kind of slow down in training, go over it, and try to build up those skills, whatever it may be. But he was doing these hip hop dances, and then part of our training would be your choice. So then his choice was to teach me to hip hop dance, you know. So it was something, we're all the way in the back of the gymnasium, and I'm not the first person that's just going to dance, free will dance. But I mean, here he was so like confident and didn't care who was around, who was looking at him. And you're thinking of this child that has all this adversity, like he's being told that in gym class he has no skills, you know, his face is basically mangled for the surgery that he has to go, you know, undertake. He's here because, you know, I don't know if his parents didn't relay that you need fixed, but like for him to just show that, like, I don't care, I'm good at this is what I love, this is the music. And then for me to just, okay, like at that point I couldn't care, like I just dropped my care and had so much fun. You know, later on I understood that the mother's like crying, you know, watching us because we just we were out of our mind, you know what I mean? For like, there's not so many moments in your life where you're just out of mind, you know, and we were out of mind. If we talk back to Blaine, or go back to Blaine a little bit, something that he's taught me, so there's so many like fantastic memories with Blaine, it's just not even funny, but something that was like super hard that we overcame together was like the high school, the elementary school in our hometown here. And when we were going off-site, so we talked about off-site before, where it took us 2 years to go off-site, you know, so we're going to the playground, we're going to the trail, we're going to all these different places, and getting ready for a 5K, you know, in my mind, we had to go to the track, you know, we had to run and all that type of stuff. So this was just something where we were, you know, he's messing around, he's making faces, we're driving, we're having fun, the radio's blasted, we're singing, you know, and then suddenly it was just immediately where everything just kind of changed, you know, the climate changed, the radio was turned off, there was no more joking, and he lost his cool. We were just sitting there and he screamed and he cried, and at that point, like, it wasn't that I had to stop it or hurry up and leave, it was just I turned off the car and I just listened to him. He's telling me everything that he experienced and just what he hated and stuff. So at that point, it was just like, you know, that was my rule right there. It was to listen. It wasn't to try to, well, you know, tell him anything that I thought or anything. And so when we left that day, well, before we left, we were able to talk and we ended up doing what we needed to do. Like, we got out of the car, we were there, like, he overcame that. And so that was just, and then when we came back to the office, you know, I told Dave, and it was like, well, do we do that again? Like, and then it just became, we needed that moment to talk about it, to vent. And, you know, we go back where, well, these kids, they don't talk about their feelings, and, you know, but that's not the case. And then we got over it, and then that's just like a place that we go for our training, you know, and we don't have to visit that memory again. We got it through. So that was kind of cool. But, I mean, I could go on and on.
You're referring to the issues that he had at school, whether it was bullying or teachers that gave him issues.
Exactly.
That was what came up at the track.
Yeah, it wasn't just one incident. Good point there. It was... Yeah, I mean, what he was telling me was he was made to feel stupid, and that another thing that he said was that he was made to feel like he wasn't normal. You know what I mean? And so, and we wouldn't have had that conversation if it weren't for that, you know, experience, so to speak. So, you know, maybe that taught me where you have to vent, you have to have that friend, you have to have somebody that you trust, that you can talk about certain things. You talk about it, you get over it, and then he overcame that. Like, he could have said nope and ran out of the car, or you know, said that he wouldn't want to go back there ever again, but he did. Like, he overcame that fear. So that just spoke volumes at that time, and, you know, still today.
Yeah, that's huge.
No, I thanked you at the time, and I'll thank you again for that, because there was a reason why, you know, he was pulled out of that school, which, you know, more than I'm going to share here, you know, but there was definitely, you know, abuse, I guess you could say, you know, as far as the way he was treated and the way everything was. So the memories there were not good, you know, so it was a matter of, you know, it wasn't a matter of we're taking him out of the school. He is getting the fuck out of the school now, you know, and this can end up either really, really bad, or for them, for them, or this is going to go the direction that we want to go. And, that was a pivotal point with you, because he would not share this we knew what happened. Lori knew what happened. I mean, everybody knew what happened, but he would not openly disclose or share or deal with that. So if it meant we had to go there for Bryce's baseball game or whatever it was, that was just kind of like the place that we didn't go. And he went, and then he was able to open up, which again is something that ASD people aren't supposed to be able to do, right? Then he did, and 2 weeks later he's doing hurdles with the hairy bearded lady. So not only did he not only was it discussed and kind of dealt with, but let go. And for a kid that age, just to be able to let go of something that heavy is huge. Everybody has people in their life that do certain things at pivotal times that become defining moments, and you don't know it, but I think you do. That was one for him that he'll probably remember until the day he dies. So that's one cool thing about actually working as a coach or with any athletes or anything like that, because you're in these positions that you never know when a situation like this can pop. And it's never expected. It's kind of like, oh, what the fuck? Yeah. And then, thinking back, it's like, oh my God, that was kind of cool. So it was definitely cool.
Any other stories like that you guys want to share, or do you want to move on?
Let's move on.
Move on.
All right, here's one. As somebody with no connection to or experience with autism, can you explain the best way to act around / interact with someone who is on the spectrum? Obviously, this varies, but any guidelines? And then, is this something that typically agitates your son that others might not think of? And so, Sheena, that applies to you as well with the people you work with.
Immediately, what comes to mind is that still to this day, I'm not thinking, okay, I'm going to go work with Blaine. He has autism. Or, oh, I have the guys tonight. Oh, they have autism. So like, yes, there's ways that I have to like plan, and that's just ingrained in what I do. But when I'm with them, like, they're human beings, and that's how I start. Like for some of my jobs where it was like we had like the PEC system around our heads, and so we're kind of like thinking, okay, well, this child might need all of the PECs. We need to do this, and this because they have autism. It seemed so foreign and scripted and whatnot. So if the child, if a child is coming through the door and they're about, this tall, like 4 feet tall, well, I kneel down so I can make eye contact with them. And maybe ask them. It just depends. Like, if you see a child walk in the door, it's like back to that observation. Like, are they pissed off? Are they happy? Do they have something in their hand? Do they have a stuffed animal in their hand? How can you engage with that child? How can you communicate that you're not there to fix them, or you need to like express that that they have autism because it's irrelevant. You want to know more about them. You can engage, you can connect, and then why your paths cross, then you can get to the meat of what you're trying to accomplish that day.
It's kind of a weird question because there's not context. Where if I was having dinner with a group of people, and let's just say they're sitting around this table, and this person here is autistic, and this person here is diabetic, and this person here is an alcoholic, and this person here is, a Baptist pastor, and I don't know any of this, and we're just having dinner, but throughout the course of dinner, this person has to, excuse themselves because they have to take their insulin. Mm-hmm. This person here doesn't order alcohol. This person here, kind of makes it known that, hey, Dave, I really don't like the word fuck, so I adjust.
Quit fucking saying it now.
Yeah, so you see, you adjust to the environment, to the people that you're with. It's just basic respect. It's not you're kissing anybody's ass, because if you look in the mirror, you have your own problems too. If you want to say that they're problems, but you have your own identity. That's a better word than what that is. If somebody has a tick, they flinch their head or whatever it is, I'm not going to sit there and say, dude, you got a tick. Oh my God, you're fuck you. Why aren't you drinking? You need to drink more. Here, have more cake. You're not going to do that. It's just treat people as people. And if you do that, then it's all good. If you're in a situation to where, it's there's more. There's more people with autism than people realize. They're living and working amongst you right now, and you're not treating them any differently. If you knew that they did, are you going to treat them differently because of that? Because that's the last thing that they're going to want. Everybody just wants to be treated human.
Yeah, I mean, and then too, then you listen. So not only are you observing, but you're listening. So like, I have a couple guys where if you said, hey, how are you doing today? They'd say, I don't want to talk right now. And so I wouldn't take offense. I wouldn't say, well, that's rude, or like, what did you say? Or no, really, how are you doing today? Then you listen, and then you would, maybe after 15 minutes, they'd come up to you. And I've had where guys are like, yeah, I was just having a bad day. How are you doing? Or just another personality comes into play where they got over whatever they were doing. So like, you give them that respect. If you do reach out and you're like, oh crap, in this person's case where he's not sure how to conduct himself, if he does take a measure where he's like, I'm really going to try, because I really am interested in you, and then you fail, so to speak, like they don't engage you as you wish they did, well, don't quit, don't take it personal, just try something else. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that trial and error. It's going to be different. It's not, oh, well, he has autism, so he's not going to look at me, so I have to have these pictures. Hey, hi, that's your like a circus act type of thing. So
this is a broad assumption, but from my experience, most of the people that I've met with ASD, they are masters of perception. So, I mean, you try to bullshit them, they know it. So just be yourself, man. Don't try to be fake, because they're going to know it. They're going to sense it. And I totally understand this is a huge freaking assumption. And again, I can be completely wrong, but this is just what I'm saying from my own experience, that you try to bullshit one of them, and I don't know if they got special powers or what the hell it is. They're turned on to it, and immediately they're turned off to you. They're not going to say anything to you. They just will no longer listen to a word that you say, because it's just, you've made yourself irrelevant.
I've noticed that with Blaine when I'm trying to be overly positive and like, hey, how was your day? He'll ignore me. And then the other times where we somehow randomly bring up a video game or something, he gets all into it. So I think he can just sense the fakeness, and that doesn't work at all for him.
There was one question I saw on there that was interesting to me, that was from I believe a police officer asking about somebody, obviously somebody with autism, if they're having a fit. He was in a situation where they were having a fit, and he had to restrain them to pull them back because he didn't want them to get hit, in traffic. And so if basically, I think the question that he was asking is, how do you go about handling and dealing with somebody who's on the spectrum as compared to somebody who's not? And just as a parent, because it's the only way I can offer advice here, I'm not a police captain or anything else of that sort, is I would want you to restrain and keep my kid from getting hit in traffic. If for some reason you thought my kid was being a threat to himself or anybody else, I would want you to restrain and keep him from hurting him or anybody else. I want you to do your job. That's what you basically
purpose, yeah,
took the oath and purpose to do. And, are you going to probably make some mistakes and, restrain somebody who's autistic just because they're overly excited? As a parent, if it was me, I'm cool with that. Your best interest was in the mind of my kid. I'm not going to be running to Channel 6 News and saying, look at this asshole. And I understand that they're in a weird situation, as things are, but your job is to protect and serve. So as a parent, that's how I would feel about that situation there is, to protect and serve, but I understand where the question's coming from because, I've heard other officers say that, people getting out of hand, their friends will say, hey, look, he's autistic, and may or may not be true. I don't know the pros and cons of that because I'm not in law enforcement, but I would say that, that's what's the negative of assuming that it's true, and what's the negative of assuming that it's not true, and then just kind of go based upon that. But that is the reason I'm putting it out there is as a parent, that is something that I think about, because I do have a big kid, and when he has meltdowns, he has meltdowns, and he may punch somebody in the face in Walmart someday. I don't, I don't want him to. I mean, we're doing everything in our power for that to not be the case. But if that is the case, just because he is on the spectrum isn't an excuse for the behavior that's being demonstrated. It should be, punished and reprimanded exactly the same way as anybody else. That's the way, that's my thought. So.
All right. Does your son play any sports or have any interest in any form of lifting? If he was interested in powerlifting, how would you go about coaching him, giving him cues, etc.?
He's not interested in sports. He never has been. Sheena's been working with him with lifting, fitness, probably would be a better example of that.
5Ks?
Yeah, 5Ks, stuff like that. If he ever showed interest in powerlifting, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. I can't answer that right now. It's a tough one for me. I would have to put more thought into that, which I haven't put into because it hasn't been something that's on the table. I try my best to control the things I can control and not worry about the things I can't control, and deal with the situations that are in front of me and don't deal with, situations that aren't actually present at the time. So I've put zero thought into that, but I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, I'd be 100% for it, because I'm not sure that I would be. It's for me, it was an outlet, and this is just putting some pros and cons out. For me, it was an outlet that served as a very good outlet, but it also had, everything's got pros and cons, and he needs outlets that are going to extend far beyond physical activity and exertion that can be readily available at any time. I think we all do, just to be able to control, behavior and deal with stress and deal with frustrations. But, for a long time, I was a person that my only outlet was, straining and training and all this other kind of stuff. Well, the problem becomes when you're only doing that 3 or 4 days a week, what the hell do you do on the other 3 days? You're driving yourself against the wall because you don't have any other way to deal with your shit. And is that really dealing with your shit or just avoiding it for an hour and a half? And this is a whole nother table talk, which could go on for 2 hours. So I'll just leave it at that and just say I will have to cross that bridge if it ever comes.
Josh, one thing too, just with a little bit of Blaine's training, I basically shared everything in the early stages where that was, play driven and, along those lines. We didn't get to like sets or those types of words for a long time. He didn't want to repeat his efforts. If we did a set of say 8 throws, then we were on to the next thing. We couldn't repeat. 6 years now of training. Like now we just got to the point probably within the past year, half of a year, where we're in like 3-week cycles. So now we're in the idea where week 1, we have like our main movement, our main strength movement. Then we have accessory work, we have conditioning work. And so now we've broken it down into it's upper body. We're gonna work this for 3 weeks. Week 1, we're just learning. We're not gonna be totally competent. We're gonna try. It's gonna be new. We're gonna be trying new exercises. We're gonna not be so strong. That week 2, with that same workout or that same setup, then week 2 we come in here and it's like, oh yeah, I know what we're doing. Now we're showing more competency. We're more confident. I don't have to tell Blaine what we're doing now. He already has like full. He knows that we're going to start, say, over here in the corner, and then we're going to walk over to the other corner. Like he knows what we're doing. The 3rd week, he'll say it himself. Oh, it's test week. Now we've already laid that foundation. Now we're going to push ourselves. We're going to try. Maybe we're going to up in weight. Maybe we're going to up in reps type of thing. So he has a lot of the mentality of Dave. So, like, for example, he's watched Dave train, maybe not come in here, but not warm up and just try to, like, go balls out on something. So sometimes I have to, like, reel him in and say, Blaine, we don't want to end up like your dad. We got to warm up, and we have to, and then too, like, for a long time doing all those little movements, like say working with a band and doing accessory type of work, he thought that was stupid, or just like, why? So the idea was, hey, Blaine, like your dad now has to work all those little muscles. And so if he didn't, then he's going to have to get another hip replacement. So like now that's his spiel is, I got to work those small areas. So I work, I strengthen those areas for the big areas. So like, that's the dialogue that we're having now. I mean, it took us a really long time to get there. If I were to force that day 1, I would have lost him. But that kind of answers that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we're not power lifters by any means, but we definitely have more of a strength training mentality, meathead mentality, so to speak.
All right, to continue with on that topic. This one is, given that autism can have a negative effect on neuromuscular coordination and motor unit control, is it harder for someone with autism to reach a high level of strength?
Possibly. I mean, how do you answer a question like that? Because how do you know what...
The genetics of that individual.
Yeah, I mean, how do you know how impacted that neural control is going to be? And now we're talking about, you're going to start talking about the central nervous system and neural control and, and all these things that if you really look into this or talk to people who really understand to the best of their knowledge, the neurological system, lymphatic system, the central nervous system, and ask them, how much do we really know about these systems? It's like 10 or 20%. So you're going to tell me that somebody's limitations are because of, their central nervous system when we don't know, we still have 80% more to learn about that entire system and how it works and reacts and interacts and so forth. I have a hard time, believing that bullshit. I have more of my outlook comes from, yes, genetics definitely play a role. There's no denying that. I'll never be one to deny that in any way whatsoever. But I think you have a really hard time saying that somebody is going to be limited based upon their genetics if they haven't put in 5 to 10 years of trying to actually be their best at whatever they're trying to do. Starting at a young age. Like you start at a young age at 5 years old, you can kind of look at how tall, somebody's parents are to figure out, are they potentially going to be in the NBA or not? Mm-hmm. But there's still outliers there. But usually if they're 5, 6, they're probably not going to be. But even with that, most people are writing themselves off and saying, okay, I don't have the genetics to that. Or they train for something for a couple of years, say strength sports, what I'm more familiar with, bodybuilding, figure, be it powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, whatever it is. And after 3 years, it's like, ah, fuck, I don't have the genetics for this. I'm like, really? You figured that out in 3 years? You know, my kid started playing t-ball, you know, when he could barely walk, you know. So before he even got to machine pitch, he had 3 years of playing baseball. I seriously doubt he was going to be playing for the majors after 3 years, you know, but your 3 years of going from doing nothing in a sport to, you know, saying, oh, I don't have the genetics to be able to excel in the sport, it's kind of a joke. Where I could also flip that and say it's kind of a joke that you think you can be a fucking coach after 3 years, because I don't know very many kids that are, you know, doing machine pitch, you know, baseball, that could go coach, you know, because they don't have the time, you know, or the repetitions underneath there to be able to move forward with that. So I think that you can't make a distinction like that without first trying, and not only trying, but trying as hard as you possibly can. There's a difference between participating and trying, and then trying as hard as you can, and then another level, which is pretty much making it your whole entire life. So there's a lot of levels there. I think you can figure it out, you know, by the third level, you know, the trying as hard as you can. And then if that's the case, where, yeah, I can be the best of the best, then you can make that conscious decision. Do you want to go to that next, this is going to be the most important thing in my life step, you know? But that's that I'm staying out of that one too, because that's a step that you got to make on your own. I'm not going to be the person that's going to make that for somebody, because that changes their life completely.
We got another good one here. Unless you want to add anything to that, Sheena.
Just when that question comes to mind, like Dave's taking that as powerlifting type of venue or extreme sports and whatnot, and I just think of the brain and brain plasticity and you know, the way that you communicate with a child and the experiences that you give them, and then you're allowing that they're having these brain connections and their neurons are firing, and now, you know, and now their muscles are going to be coordinated in a certain way based off of those connections. And it starts not even, you know, in the weight room. It's just how you treat somebody. So based off of that question, like, I don't feel like a 3-year-old, we know this is the diagnosis and this is his ability, motor control, all of that is going to dictate whether or not that he would be, you know, an accomplished strength athlete. Like, I would say there's absolutely potential. That's all I would venture to say on that.
Even if say the connections are disrupted, you don't know what compensation patterns are going to develop because of that disruption. So a compensation pattern most definitely can be developed, because it happens with most injuries. But who's to say that a compensation pattern couldn't be developed that actually makes somebody more proficient at doing it than what the actual first route compensation pattern would be?
The more efficient,
yeah,
you know.
So there's so many unknowns of things like that.
Okay. Any tried and true methods for sleep? We tried essential oils, melatonin, and even a prescription, which was last resort. They all seemed to work at first, but then stopped working after a while. Our daughter wakes up multiple times at night, and my husband and I are exhausted.
We don't have that problem now. That was fortunately something that he grew out of, or just because he got bigger. Following a routine and sticking to the routine matters. So getting to bed at a certain time, and you know, it could be 9:30, it could be 10:30, whatever it is. You know, even if you know they're going to be in bed and they're going to sit there and scream the whole time, you know, you have to make sure that they're going to bed at the same time. Basic things like a dark room, a comfortable room, a cool room, all those type of things matter. Sleep disruptions do seem to be popular or more associated with the younger ones with ASD, as a parent, it just sucks. You know, I don't know any way to kind of go around it, but it's just think of it as an extension of having, you know, when he was a baby, you know, because when they're a baby, you're up all the time anyhow. So it's just, it's a longer extension of that. And, you know, eventually it gets to them. It's once they fall asleep, you know, it's usually good, but it's getting to sleep is the issue. And it's, so I can't tell you why, because everybody is different. You know, with my son, it's just there's so much on his mind that he's trying to figure out. And for a long time, we would try to take the iPad away, or we tried to take games away. But then I made this connection that if I do that, then he's trying to figure out how to solve the game in his head. Where if he just has the damn game and then he solves it, he'll shut it down and go to bed. So you got to kind of look at things from all perspectives, but yeah, it sucks. I mean, you can try. When it comes to food, you know, and stuff like that, these things matter, but it's also very, very hard when you're dealing with an autistic child, because they will, you know, they have no problem not eating. You know, it's pizza for 3 days, and if there's no pizza, fuck it, I won't eat for 5 days. You know, I want pizza if that's what they want. And then, you know, you're kind of stuck at that, but you can still try to get in, you know, the healthiest food you can. When my son was first diagnosed, we put him through a huge intensive food testing program to where almost everything was eliminated from his diet except like celery. God, it was like celery, ham, and Sprite, because it was a clear soda. And it may have been 5 things, and then I'd have to go back and find all the materials, and Dr. Serrano was the one that orchestrated all this. And then after 3 months, we were able to introduce some foods back, and then introduce some foods back. And we definitely found some foods that were triggers. Maple syrup is a big, big trigger. Sugar, not so much as what people would think with him. With most kids, way too much. But, you know, he's average with the sugar count. The maple syrup was the only one that's just like, maple syrup is the whole shit. That's in the house. It's like, there's just no. So it's that may or may not help with the sleep. The point I was trying to make is we haven't spent a lot of time dealing with things like IV therapy, IV vitamin therapy, or any of those type of things, because now you got to deal with the needle, you got to deal with the IV. You know, there's other factors that are associated with that as well that may or may not help. But once again, it's getting bombarded with 9,000 things that are supposed to be helpful or cures. And it's like, everybody wants to cure my kid, but I'm still trying to figure out what he suffers from. You know, cure him from what? You know, so, you know, I don't quite understand that. But try different things. That's all I can say. But it has to work for the child, or it's not going to work for you. It should get better as they get older.
I'd add to that, Josh, that what's the physicality output per day, like based off of Dave's with the schedule and everything set. Are they moving? Like, are they at one point being exhausted by riding a bike or climbing a hill or anything like climbing a tree type of thing? And if that's a missing link, then that would be something that I'd put as part of their schedule and see how that works.
Okay. I think this one might be a good one to end on, unless there's other things you guys wanted to touch upon.
No, we're good.
As a parent of an autistic child, how do you stay positive? The grind is real. How do you overcome? And just any last advice you guys have.
What's my alternative? To be negative? I mean, I still have the responsibility and the accountability to raise 2 kids, you know, and to have a family. So, you know, are there frustrations? Yes. But, you know, this is a choice that you're asking me here. You know, how do you stay positive? How do you stay negative? That is a choice that I make. there's still frustrations, there's still roadblocks, there's still all this other kind of stuff. But I think, as I talked about in the last podcast, when you start dealing with false narratives and all the stuff that you're playing in your head that's bullshit, I've learned to get that out of my head and just deal with it and have faith, that everything's going to be okay. I think that's a key thing, and it's really not coming at it from any religious undertone of any sort. It's just, regardless of whatever the situation is that I've ever been in my life, I've always known at some point in time it's going to be okay. And if you know that, to me, that's having faith that it's going to be okay. It might suck. There might be really, really, really bad times, but at some point it's going to be all right. And as long as you know that, and you always have that to fall back on, and you truly believe that in your heart and soul, then nothing really becomes that huge of a deal that you have to contend with. I'm not saying life is easy. I'm the last person to say that. Adversity is necessary. It brings prosperity, but it certainly helps when you're dealing with the adversity to know that at some point it's going to be okay. And to get to a point to where you think at some point it's never going to be okay, then you need to find professional help, or you need to really start having some serious questions about decisions that you're making and ways that you think and things that you're doing, so you can be able to put yourself in that place, because life it's not meant to be easy. We are meant to grow from adversity. So that would be my final thoughts, I suppose.
Any way that people can get, any other resources you guys wanted to let them know?
Well, Sheena's got final thoughts, I'm sure.
Yeah. Josh, could you repeat that question once more? Because I don't want to.
It was, as a parent of an autistic child, how do you stay positive? The grind is real. How do you overcome?
Yeah, and so, I didn't give birth to a child, but I have, just thinking of relationships in general, you chose to have a child. Why would you want, if this is a hardship, then, why would you want everything to be perfect, which would never be a thing anyways. But any relationship that you put yourself into, whether or not that's with your child or at work or your significant other, like every relationship takes work. It's hard, and but from my perspective, as far as who I work with and what I'm trying to accomplish, like at the end of the day, I want to instill movement and movement into these children's lives, that they have like a life skill that they're always going to be able to have. Like, we need to move. That's how our brain functions. Without movement, then we die. So I want to have it that if a kid would regularly just stay in his room and be afraid and not talk to anybody, that I can instill that he's going to walk outside that door and he's going to be able to have fun or move or have time with somebody in his life based off of movement or something along those lines. So, and then it always just comes back to just that you're working with a human being, like do your best, care, have enthusiasm, be patient, and like what Dave was saying, have faith, have hope, know that it's all going to work out. That's really, I think. That's good.
I'm going to circle in and tell, and movement matters. And even from a smaller perspective than what Sheena just made it out to be, we're dealing with kids, and we read a lot of questions that video games. So we're dealing with a lot of sedentary kids and obesity, and I'm sure the autistic child is probably more sedentary. Again, it's an assumption. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Than others, but movement is essential just for digestion. So if your child is only taking a crap once every 3 or 4 days, well, then walk around the house, walk around the block. One of the first things that, if you've ever been in the hospital and you have surgery, one of the first things they're trying to get you to do is to get up and move, so you can digest, so your lungs can process air, so you don't get pneumonia. So I fear that we're getting to a stage with some children that the movement is becoming less than what we're going to see with some seniors in senior centers or in hospitals who are developing pneumonia because of lack of movement. And they have nurses that are coming in trying to get them to go walk the halls. If they're walking the halls more than the kids walk in the house, then there's going to be some serious implications with this. So, and I don't even, most of us don't even consider that movement, but I think it now needs to be defined as being part of movement because it's not happening.
All right.
Resources, you were saying. So on our website, if you're on the main page, if you click articles.
On elitefts.com, that is.
Thank you. So then if you scroll down if you hover over articles, then you'll see special education. At least that's where all of our articles are right now. And then as we were mentioning, like if you want to contribute, that would be going to the front page, scrolling all the way down, and then clicking on outside submissions to have more information on just the minimal requirements we ask for. We have Dave's log. You can go.
Yeah, we got just come to the site. We got training logs. We got coaching blogs. We got articles. We got the podcast. We got the podcast that's here on, the live on YouTube. Then it's also wherever Josh says it is. Stitcher,
Libsyn, Spotify, Apple, iTunes.
Pretty much everywhere. And then I have my own Instagram account, which is under the bar. Then we have the Elite FTS Instagram account and Facebook, and we're not that hard to find. The one thing I will say is, while I did say I don't read any of the comments on YouTube, I have my reasons for that. Most of it is laziness, if you want me to be completely honest about it. But I'm not going to respond to people who don't have respect. So if the questions are respectful and they are on the YouTube, then I will more than happy take the time to respond to those. If they're not, I'm not even going to bother, because I spend over 20 hours a week just answering DMs and doing an AMA on Instagram. So any time that I'm going to spend dealing with an idiot on any other social media platform is a disservice. I'm taking away from the people who actually do want me to answer questions for them. So at this time, I do answer all my DMs on Instagram, and every Friday I do Ask Me Anything. I want to say the time is 6 o'clock, but it changes based upon whatever the Friday is. So there's that. If you don't have access to Instagram, I repost all those AMAs on my coaching blog, so they're all there as well.
Coaching blog on elitefts.com.
Yes, elitefts.com.
All right.
That's it.
That is it.